Avatar: The Way of Water arrives 13 years after the original, and we couldn't be more excited for a new film by James Cameron. Today we'll discuss the sequel's characters and themes, along with the absurdly expensive looking visuals as we explore the world of Pandora. Welcome everyone to the Atomic Cinema Experiment. I am Peter, and joining me as always is Tara.
Greetings, citizens.
This is a science fiction movie podcast. We are here today to talk about Avatar: Way of the Water, the sequel, the long-awaited sequel, I should say, to Avatar, which came out in 2009. The fact that blows my mind is that the gap between Avatar 1 and 2 is actually bigger than Titanic and Avatar. And that sticks out in my mind because I was waiting for the next James Cameron film for like most of my teenage years. And then eventually when I was 20, I got Avatar. And it's been even longer until we got Avatar 2. So here we are. We'll start spoiler free as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we get into the spoilers so you can be safe from them. But yes, obviously there might be some casual spoilers for the first Avatar, even at the start of this, just because it is a direct follow-up. It follows on from the events of the first film, so references to who survived the first movie and things like that are just going to naturally be there. So if you haven't seen the first one for some reason and you're clicking on a review for Avatar 2, be aware of that. So we shall get into it. But we just reviewed the first film. It was the last episode, and we were both probably more positive than most on the internet when it comes to Avatar. Internet nerddom doesn't like it very much. So we were both excited for Way of the Water, and big event for us this weekend, so we're going to talk about it and we'll get into things. The basic gist is more or less what I think we thought it was going to be, which was the Sky People have returned because it's been about a decade or so later, and Jake and Neytiri have a bunch of kids now. We'll get into all that, of course, but also we knew that the actor who played the villain, Quaritch, was back, but we didn't know how and what capacity he was coming back. Obviously, I would stay away from describing that until we get to spoilers, but yes, he is back in some capacity, and this leads to going to new parts of Pandora and the bigger threat from the humans from Earth growing now, because inevitably they were always going to come back with more force just because they won the fight in the first movie. What do you think the reaction is going to be from the military and the government when like the people who are jettisoned from Pandora like arrive on Earth and they say, oh, the blue people like fought us and sent us home packing? Well, they're going to say, well, here's 10 times the military, go back and take what's ours. That's what they're going to say. So that's the gist of it. Without getting too spoiler, that's the gist of Avatar 2. So Tara, how did you feel about Avatar: Way of the Water?
I loved it. I thought it was so beautiful. It was such a beautiful film. It's like when you think effects can't get any better, you know, we're at peak. Everything looks beautiful. Like maybe they'll get better, but like it won't matter at this point. And then you see something like this and you go, oh, no, this is like next generation. This is like the difference between, you know, the PlayStation 4 and 5, and you're like, oh, no, this is different. This is better. This is incredible. I mean, maybe better is the wrong word. It's better quality, but like, it's definitely a step up, you know? Things have been elevated from here. I thought, I mean, yeah, obviously this is just like the technology or whatever, but like, it feels so good to get a James Cameron movie, a new James Cameron movie, because the man just knows how to tell a story, and it is a great story. I mean, I've heard people say otherwise, but I do think it's a really beautiful story that's being told. I love all the new characters in this. I think the kids like just steal the show. I think they're all great. Some of them have more to do than others, but it's more like their story anyway. And it's also nice knowing that Cameron has a plan. So like maybe if some of the characters seem like they don't get as much to do, we know that, well, there's so many other movies coming out after this where I know they're going to have a chance to shine. So like I still find this story to be very satisfying, very emotional and very beautiful.
I also like the movie a lot, actually. And one of the things that you said there that I kind of want to like just emphasize a bit more is you said how like this is elevated effects again, and you know I think there's a lot of big movies that come out now where I'm baffled with how their budgets are like $200-300 million because I don't see it on the screen. Because one of the things you said there is that things can't get any better, but then they did. But I think the one caveat I'd put in that is that yeah, from Avatar 1 I agree with that statement, but I wouldn't agree that Hollywood in the last like 5 years, like I think most big movies recently have had kind of, you know, it feels like they're kind of just shoving out whatever effects, they don't really care that much. You know, I wouldn't describe as even the movie that briefly beat Avatar at the box office, Endgame, like the effects in that aren't that great. Like they're kind of just passable for a movie of that size. It's like one of the most biggest movies of all time.
But I mean, we had like the Apes movies, which, you know, also kind of did that, where it's like, oh, this is incredible. This is like Avatar level, but with fur. So maybe even better.
I'm not saying there's no examples. I'm just saying in general, right? And the superhero stuff is so prevalent, and this is most of what the big blockbusters are, that I think my feeling in the last few years, because you know the last Apes movie was what 2017. You know, it's been 5 years already since that last one. My feeling recently is that movies don't have good effects. Like they're kind of, you know, like they're under the bar they should be at for, you know, for whatever reason, because they're saving costs, because they're spending the money elsewhere, because they don't think it's important enough. So this leap that this movie has feels even bigger because movies have been under the bar, what they should be at recently, and then this is like raising it again. And I think this movie is extremely expensive, and there's all sorts of talk this week about how much it actually has to make to break even. I think it's all a bit false in the speculation, because clearly it's kind of a package deal with at least the third one, if not like beyond that. And Disney are building theme parks, they're building so much stuff, they want this to be a franchise. I think Cameron himself is being a little cheeky with him saying, oh well, 4 and 5 won't get made unless this makes like, you know, $2.5 billion. No, whatever. I don't think it needs to be that much. And it's probably not going to, and I don't think it needs to. But I think this leap in effects feels even bigger because movies in general have had mediocre CG and even when the Apes were coming out, they were the exception by and large. Like a lot of movies around that time weren't putting out the effects that Apes were, which I admit were kind of the gold standard of the last, you know, decade, give or take. And same kind of goes for action scenes. Cameron shoots action scenes so well.
The third act of this movie is just so, it just reminds you of like, oh yeah, this is a Cameron movie, because it feels like you already know the characters at this point and you are rooting for them. And then you watch the action and you're like, oh, like I love this. This feels right. This feels good. This is like, you get the general sense of like where everybody is, what's happening. You get familiar story beats even from other Cameron films, but like you'll like seeing it because it feels good to know that, well, I'm very confident that Cameron knows how to tell this story, how to show this scene play out, you know?
Again, the action direction's on another level. Honestly, I was expecting it to be good because I know Cameron's good at action, but watching it actually makes me kind of sad that I'm like, why are all other action movies recently like not good? Well, at least, you know, they're all like, again, they're kind of serviceable. Like a lot of the action you get in a lot of other recent blockbusters is serviceable, but it's like really not like. And part of the problem is that
flashy. Like they have like one thing that they're trying to do that's you know, like the hallway fight from like Old Boy is trying to be like recreated, and a bunch of other things, because that's like the trendy thing to do right now.
I'm glad.
You know?
I'm glad that's where you went with it. I thought you were going to criticize Old Boy's scene. I was like, wait, what are you talking about Old Boy? It's like a great...
I only said Old Boy, but I've not seen it because I know that that's the thing that you always bring up if I bring up something else like Dread or something, you know, something I've actually seen. But I know that was like the cool thing to do in Hollywood for a little while. Like that's the action people want to see. Oh, people like this, let's just do this again over and over again.
Well, do I know why the hallway fights were generally working? Is because it forced a level of constraint on the filmmakers, because they're in this confined space, and typically the ones that were impressive, like the ones in the Daredevil show, were like, oh, we're going to do it all in one take. And because of that, you actually kind of like inherently get what Cameron's so good at doing is one of the things you said there when you were describing why the action in the third act was so good, is because you always understood where everyone was and the geography, their relation to each other, what their goals were in the scene, what the jeopardy was in the scene. And there's so many big budget movies, and it is mostly superhero stuff, but I'm not trying to rag on them, it's just that they happen to be what most of the big movies are these days. I know they have this like assembly line or like pipeline production thing now, where they start like doing the pre-viz for the action sequences before they've even hired a director. So they're kind of like this plug and play thing, and that's like one of the reasons why they feel a little disjointed, is that the director's not making decisions for the action sequences that benefit the story. They're given a film where the action scenes are already mapped out, and they have very little control over them, and they're just directing all the other scenes. And I think when you watch this movie, like, everything in every scene is in, you know, it's in service of what the story is, and it's a director where every single part of it, and some may argue there's too much of it because it's 3 hours and like 20 minutes long. It is a long ass movie.
I don't care.
Right? But every single thing feels like it's part of his vision to try and create this story. And you can criticize the final story if you want. Obviously, we are a bit more positive on it than most people, or some people anyway. But everything feels like it's part of his vision and acts like what he's creating. And it's so there's so few directors who can make a big budget movie right now and get the level of control that a Cameron or a Christopher Nolan. Like, I just saw the trailer for Oppenheimer today because it just came out, and
I saw it at the IMAX today.
Christopher Nolan can just walk into a room at any studio and say, I want to make this movie, give me $200 million, and you'll make enough money to make it worth your while. And he'll just get it, and regardless of the faults, and some of his later films have got faults, they're Christopher Nolan's films. Like, he made what he wanted to make. And
yeah, he's a name, so
yeah.
people have, you know, confidence in him.
Yeah.
And so does audience, you know, people will go.
And similar with Jim Cameron is you get, this is his film, right? For any faults you want to throw at it, you know, it's on him. He made these choices. He wasn't forced by a studio. It's not something that's as constrained by the system as a lot of other things are. And what I'm really getting at with all this is that because of that, when you get these action sequences that feel like they're actually adding to the story and everything's been building up to this particular action scene, they feel really like they fit and they're earned, as opposed to, oh, okay, it's time for that action scene that was like predetermined beforehand. And maybe that's why a lot of those action scenes aren't that well directed. It's not even that the directors making the movies aren't good at it. They're not even getting a chance to really direct them because they're already, like, they're being told, oh, this is what the action scene is. We've already decided on these are the big FX shots. So, you know, any choice you might have had isn't there. So, whereas with this, everything looks great, obviously, but it's the way it's edited, the way it's directed and paced, everything you understand. And the third act of this movie, there's a lot of characters involved. There's a lot of things going on. There's vehicles. There's, you know, there's water, right? Which only just adds things.
It's a new Pandora, even. Like, we're in a whole different part of the planet that we're not used to from the first movie. So, like, obviously we know Jake and Neytiri, but like, it still looks so much different from the first film. Not just like technically, but like the whole landscape is different. Yeah,
and that's a big, obviously, point in the film, is that we've left the jungle and we've been into the oasis, or whatever you want to call it, like, you know, the reef people, as they refer to them in the film, and it's a slightly different looking type of Na'vi. You know, they look a bit more amphibian. They've got a lighter skin tone. You know, it feels like a different part of the world, which is something you don't often get in science fiction. You know, normally in science fiction, that planet has one species on it. It has one climate.
No, there's like definitely adaptations from just evolving in a different part of a different type of climate than the other Na'vi.
One small detail I'll just mention here is that the sea Na'vi, if you want to call them that or whatever, like, they kind of make fun of like our regular Na'vi's tails. They don't think their tails are that big, and they kind of, like, you know, joke. And you can joke about penis sizes and whatever if you want, but it's basically just like it's just to show a difference. I never thought of
that. That's such a man comment.
I'm not saying you should. I'm just the idea of them teasing them for having small tails. Come on, what does that sound like? It sounds like a 12-year-old making a joke about a dick size. Come on.
12-year-olds don't make that kind of joke.
Yes, they do.
About penis size?
Yeah, they do.
they're still growing. They're not even, I mean, maybe they're around puberty age at 12.
Trust me, 12-year-old boys make dick jokes.
Okay, but they don't understand them.
Maybe they don't. I'm not. I am not claiming they understand anything, but they absolutely make dick jokes. I remember being 12. Okay.
I'm sorry you had to go through that.
Thanks, I guess. But no, I mean, so I wanted to hit in those points though, because when you threw out like the effects like being another step up, like you can see every penny that this movie had spent on it on the screen. It looks gorgeous. It looks technically on another level, and the action is so well directed that it puts most recent stuff to kind of shame as far as action specifically goes. Obviously, like the story once again isn't that complicated, and if I have like a negative thing to say about this movie, is that when I was going into it, there was kind of a hope, right? There was a hope that this was going to be so far and above the first one that it was going to, like, I was getting in thinking, all right, is James Cameron doing a sequel, right? It has two other sequels, not counting Piranha 2 for obvious reasons. Has two other sequels, are Aliens and Terminator 2. That's a lofty bar. That's a lofty expectation to go into a movie with. And if there's any disappointment to even remotely say, and it's not a big one, but it's not on that level, right? It's better than the first movie. I think the emotional beats with the characters, and I think it is partly because of the kids are good. Like I think the main kid that we follow is the heart of the movie, and if anything, he gets more screen time than Jake and Neytiri. To be honest, like it really kind of is his movie. I think the emotional beats land better than the first one did. It feels like a stronger film. It's a little bit messier because it is longer and there's a lot more going on. But I think the emotional beats like land harder, and that's great. So it's better than the first film. But I still think that it's not going to necessarily convert people who just didn't like Avatar at all. And I would say that it's really good, but it's still under like Cameron's like top 3 or 4, like relatively comfortably. Because the story is still relatively quite simple. It's a revenge story. There's some really good character beats in it, but it's not. It's not a Terminator. It's not. T2. It's not Aliens. It's not.
I like this better than T2.
That's a bold statement.
I know. I just got out of the theater like really not that long ago.
I'm not complaining. Spaciness. It's a slightly spacey take. I think spacey take is good for business.
I'm as hot on Terminator 2 as a lot of other people. Like I know it's a very important film to a lot of boys that are your age through whatever Gen X or whatever the 40-year-old somethings are. I think that's a very important film to them because of the father-son relationship stuff going on. Plus it's a very cool movie. It's very action. I think the heart of this movie lands with me a bit more. And I really do love Jake and Neytiri in this movie. And I love, the first Avatar. I was really positive on that when we reviewed it. And I don't know. I think this movie just kind of speaks to me a bit more than that one does.
That's fair. That's fair. I was mainly. I obviously don't have to preface everything I say with this, but I'm always saying what I think. I'm always saying how I feel about it. And to me, Cameron's got like his 4 or 5 movies that are like his like. That's why James Cameron is James Cameron.
Honestly, like I see almost all of his filmography in this movie. Like all those movies felt like practice to make this. Not that I'm saying that this one's better than all of those, because I still have my favorites also, but like I like there's a little bit of Titanic in this. There's definitely aliens in this, although I hate it when you bring that up, but it's true in this case. There's Terminator 2 in this at parts. Like I just see so much of his films been like, I can do this again in this movie, and it's going to be like it's gonna be great. Like this is that was all storyboard for Avatar 2, it seems.
I mean, that's not weird that some directors have like themes and motifs that they go back to. That's like that's just normal. Like most directors who have like a long filmography will have ideas that they keep coming back to because it's what appeals to them or whatever. So
yeah, I mean totally.
Yeah, I'm not surprised that you can recognize parts in this. I mean, I think some of them stick out a bit more than others, but there's absolutely, I mean, Titanic's the easy one just because there's so much water stuff, you know, especially towards the end with, like, you know, being trapped or trying to, like, get away from water and things like that. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of that stuff going on towards the end. So, and yeah, I mean, I liked Avatar more than Titanic, so it's no surprise that I like this one also more than Titanic. So it's an easy one for me.
I saw the movie with my sister, and I said, "What's your favorite Cameron movie?" And she said, "Titanic."
I mean, she was a young girl in the 90s. I suppose I can't be surprised. But then again, so were you.
So was I, yeah. Well, Titanic's pretty high on my list, too. Because, again, like, when you go to a Cameron movie, it's just like, I'm going to the movies, and I'm going to see the next big blockbuster film of whatever Christmas time or whatever it is. And you leave the theater going, that was incredible. That was magnificent. That was a ride. That was way more than I got from any other film I saw this year. And I am just, like, emotionally, like, drained and, like, visually. I've never seen anything like that before. And I had that with Titanic, you know. Yeah, there's a love story and stuff, but, you know, I was a teenage girl, and yeah, I was in love with Leo also. But, like, you know, you just come out of a James Cameron movie and going, like, that's why they make movies, you know. This is the feeling you're supposed to have. And he just reminds you, not that we ever, you know, lost our love of cinema or even, like, new films, but it just reminds you, like, you could still be mesmerized. You could still be amazed. You could still say, that was magnificent when you left the theater, you know. I am mad at James Cameron, though. Because during this promotional stuff, mm-hmm. especially after you've watched the movie, it's even more, like, mind-blowing, this decision. He had to have been forced to do it. It's my only thing, is that he went to Japan. He went to, like, Japanese SeaWorld and said, "Welcome to Pandora," and, like, all these, like, whale riders and, like, all these dolphins came out and did flippy doos for an audience and stuff like that. Like, why would you go to someplace so awful like a SeaWorld in a country that eats whales to promote this movie? It's so mind-blowing to me.
I have thoughts on that, but I can't really talk about them.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. I'm so angry about that. And especially after you watch the film, we could bring it up again later if you like, but that is the one thing about this movie that I am super pissed off at, and it is just James Cameron. Like, come on, man. Do you have ethics or don't you?
I didn't know he did that, to be honest.
Yeah, I saw that, like, a few days ago, and I was just like, well, that's disappointing. And then after you watch the movie, you're like, well, now that's mind-boggling. Like, that doesn't make any sense anymore.
Anyway, on the movie's runtime, you know, people are saying it's too long. I would say that there's maybe a little chunk in the middle that could be cut down a bit. And I only say this because it all looked fantastic. There was a point, sort of in the, like, back half of the middle hour, where I started to think, I don't need as many shots of people staring at things that are beautiful, because it made sense when we first went to the new part of the planet and they're looking at all these things underwater for the first time and all that. But it felt like we got an extra couple of montages of people just looking at things that were pretty as the music played. And, you know, obviously you're thinking, oh, I know this movie's like 3 hours and, you know, 15 minutes or whatever it is, and I'm just thinking,
never once thought about it.
There's a few minutes here that could probably be trimmed. I think
some of the scenes that you're talking about is for a character that's gonna, like, there's some setup for a character in this that a lot of shots of her just kind of looking at pretty things seem to be some sort of connection that's going to come up in a later film, and like probably just the next film even.
Oh yeah. I don't want to get into any of that until we get to spoiler. I just want. But you can establish that just with a little bit less of it. Like, there's still such a thing as just doing it too many times.
Honestly, like, I'm kind of tired of this argument of, like, I hear this all the time, like, because I do listen to other people who talk about movies, and they always bring up, like, oh, could it have been shorter? And I'm so tired of that now. Like, I know this movie is over 3 hours, and so that is a fair question to ask. But at the same time, I'm like, this is this is what James Cameron wanted us to see. This is the director, I assume what the director's cut is, this is the movie that was trimmed down already to say, no, this is all the stuff that I want the audience to see. It's like ordering something in a beautiful meal from like a 3-star Michelin star chef and being like, I don't know, a little too many carrots or something. Like, well, that's the meal. The meal has this many carrots in it. I don't know. Like, it's just such a, like, yeah, maybe you could trim some stuff down. Like, well, I guess, but I feel like all that stuff was so necessary to like really understand all of the kids, because they were the heart of the film. So watching them, explore and like build relationships and stuff like that was all important to me. And even like building up
hold on
the world of Pandora.
Hold on a second. Before you go into anything else, I don't know if I agree with the analogy you just came up with there. Because the way you're describing it is that
I don't really want to go into that, honestly.
We're not allowed to critique something. Like, I can go.
No, that's not what I'm saying, though. That's not what I'm saying. Like,
but you are. You're basically saying that we're not like you don't want anyone to like question this. Like no, a movie comes out.
I'm just saying I'm tired of that argument. Like I really am. Like I hear it all the time from like movies that are an hour and 45. I'm like, oh, that's awfully close to 2 hours. It should really be 90 minutes or something like that. Like. What? I think that's so dumb. Like, movies are the length that they are, and like I don't know, like if there really is a point where you're like, I'm so bored, then yeah, sure, that probably could have been removed or condensed somehow. Like maybe it was just poorly written in that spot or something like this. But like so much of this movie is about building the world of Pandora and like being in it. And like, especially when you watch it in 3D where you are like really immersed in this beautiful location, and like even all the connections to the first film of like, where do we find the tree that everybody connects to? Oh, it's still in here, but it's in this other part because it's not the same as the forest.
Okay, but you're moving back onto this, like just to stick on this talking point though, because I'm not done talking about this. I think criticizing if a movie's too indulgent and the pacing suffers from it is a valid criticism, and I don't think I'm not going to say
that's
here.
That's not what other people say, though.
Well, yeah, but you're complaining about just generally. But I'm saying, like, I'm trying to be objective and point out things that I think could be classed as a flaw and things that could maybe tighten the film up. I think that's completely fine and valid, and it's absolutely something that should be critiqued in a movie. And movies in general are probably a bit too long these days. Like everything's just kind of like bloat is an issue. Bloat is absolutely an issue in movies. I'm not saying it's that bad here, because I don't think it's that big of a deal. I'm talking about a few minutes that could be trimmed of maybe just a couple things. Was like, okay, you've repeated this kind of moment a little bit too many now. That's it. Minor thing.
Did it really bother you though when you were watching it?
Well, I felt the pacing. I felt the runtime.
Because I mean, honestly, when I went to the theater, like my theater was packed. I mean, I did go to an IMAX, so like in his opening weekend, so of course it was going to be. And the IMAX that I went to is kind of an older one, so like the seats are the lanes are super narrow and really really long. So if you need to get up to use the bathroom, I was expecting to have to like stand up to let people out constantly. I didn't see anybody get up. Nobody like left their seat to go use the bathroom. Like everybody was like, I don't want to move, and I was so surprised by that because the movie's in water. Surely, if you drink too much, you'll have to get up to use the bathroom. I
mean, I'll go to the bathroom in any movie. I will hold it for any movie I see, and I was bursting for a piss. For 2 hours of this movie, I was bursting for a piss. I was in pain at the end of this movie. So
well, you didn't properly prepare.
Well, maybe I didn't, but
also, like, yeah, that's like you never thought, okay, this is a bathroom break moment. I'm gonna get up.
No, but I don't
just looking at pretty stuff.
But I don't think about that in any movie, especially when I know I'm going to talk about it and review it. Like, I'm not missing a scene. Like, I'm just not doing it. But that's the way my mind works. So to me, it's not weird that no one got up. I would never go to the bathroom during a movie. I know that sounds insane to some people, but I will not miss this. If I go to a bathroom to the bathroom during a movie, it means that my opinion, like, I've already given up. I already don't like the movie if I go to the bathroom.
Yeah, but a packed house for full of people who aren't reviewing movies.
Oh, sure.
I assume that is an assumption, but I assume so. I didn't see anybody get up. I never had to like adjust, my legs so someone can squeeze by or anything the whole film.
Well, that's yeah, but like. I don't think you can use that as just a gauge of like that doesn't mean that the movie couldn't be trimmed down a little bit. Like they can still everyone can still be into the movie and love pretty much everything it's doing, but agree, it could have maybe been like 5-10 minutes short. If there's a few things that could have been tightened up.
5-10 minutes. I think that's so dumb.
Look, you can laugh at me all you want. I think this is a fair thing to talk about, and it's fair to say that there's a couple of moments where I feel like, okay, we've had them stop and stare at some magical looking things maybe a few too many times. It's time to sort of move on with the plot, right? This wasn't even meant to be a big deal, but you're fighting me so hard on it, it's making it sound like I am like wanting to rip it apart, and I don't.
Well, then let's move on.
This is your fault. It was like a minor thing. It was like, yeah, I could probably trimmed a few minutes, and then that turned into like, I don't know. Sometimes I get accused of not wanting to give in when I love something too much, and I feel like you're really guilty of it right now.
That's not how I'm reading this.
You've got the big Pandora-shaped, rose-tinted 3D glasses on. Everything's perfect. I'm not allowed to criticize anything. That's what I'm feeling right now.
Well, you would be incorrect.
Well, okay.
Because you cannot let a point go by without defending, something to the win. That's all you care about is the win. No, you're movie fighting me.
What? What you talking about?
Nothing. I'm ready to move on. I didn't mind the length. I knew going in it was going to be a long run, and I just was into every minute of the film. So I appreciated getting more of Pandora straight to my veins. Thank you.
That's all fair. There was nothing you said there that was a problem. You poo-pooed what I said before. I defended my stance.
Stop fighting me.
I'm not fighting you. I'm
You're
just
still fighting me.
I'm fighting you because you said I'm fighting you, so now I'm fighting you to say that I'm not fighting you.
Can we please move on?
This makes complete sense. The logic tracks.
Just can't help yourself.
You're driving me insane. The movie's really good. I thought the movie's really good. That does come up occasionally though, where I really like a movie, but I'm still going to critique it. I'm still going to say this is what doesn't work in it. This is what could be improved, because most movies do have things that could be improved. And that's okay. That's not me shitting on it, and that's not me like taking anything away from the good things that it has.
I know.
Well, you always seem to get upset when I do it with a movie that you really like.
I do really like this movie, yeah.
Come on.
But I also think it's just kind of petty.
But
the movie's 3 hours and 24 minutes. It should really be 3 hours and 20.
There's nothing petty about this. I can be petty.
Cameron agrees with me.
I can be petty. Believe you in me. I know I can be petty. I can be petty when I'm in the mood to be petty. But that critique is not petty. That critique is a perfectly valid critique. Okay? Don't you tell me when I'm being petty. I'll tell you when I'm being petty.
All right. You feel good? Do you feel better about yourself now? You feel like you feel better? You feel good?
I feel alright.
Is this spoiler time yet?
I think we're about to get the spoilers. Yes. Dear. Okay. Full spoilers for Avatar: Way of the Water. You have been warned. We shall get into things.
Buckle up.
All right. You're not in Kansas anymore. He said that again. I want everyone to know that before Tara saw the movie, I referenced the "You're not in Kansas anymore. You're on Pandora," and she sort of went, "Huh? What? What are you talking about? Was it the Fuzz?" And I'm like, "We watched the movie last week. Don't you remember the line of dialogue?"
Nope.
But I'm glad I did, because I knew he was going to do it again. So now when they said it again, you were like, "Aha! That's a callback."
It's almost the same speech, actually.
It is, yeah. He's giving a speech to, obviously now he is an avatar himself, as are all of his troops, because they got the bald guy was back as well. Who I recognised because he was bald and his avatar was bald, so it was really obvious.
Yeah. Except for the braid.
Except for the braid, because he needs that.
Can't be bald there.
Because that's his connector. That's his USB connector. He needs that. But yeah. So it turns out is a sort of they had a plan in place that in case they all die, they all sort of like uploaded their minds, their memories to a copy as they're growing their avatar back on Earth, and so Quaritch is dead. Like the human is dead, but this is a copy of him that was made just before the mission that he died in Avatar. So it's a really interesting element where he's back, and it's still him, and he's got all the same personality and memories, but he doesn't actually know how he died. So part of that early part of the stuff in the film is like him kind of like going to the scene of the death and like seeing his skull and crushing it and all that stuff. So yeah, that's what I'm starting us on is Quaritch and how he returns. What do you think of his like development in the film and all that?
I actually find him to be probably the most interesting character as far as like what it means for him to become the thing that he hated so much, and like what it means after the movie also, like what it means going into the next one. Like I don't want to jump straight to the end or anything, but you're gonna do it anyway. Well, there's you want to talk about the Quaritch, and like I like when they explain how he's back in the movie, I'm like, okay, whatever, let's just get into it. Like it's here's the thing that sets up how they're there. Like would Quaritch even agree to this after the events of the first, like while watching the first movie? Or like he's kind of hates these guys, and he kind of doesn't understand the whole people becoming an avatar of Na'vi so that they can incorporate. Like he seems to have like a negative opinion about that. So why would he even agree to something like this?
No, I can answer that, because in the little video he leaves for himself, he clearly doesn't think he's going to die. He's too arrogant. He thinks that no, I'm not going to die today, and then his buddy's like, "Hoorah!"
And we get Giovanni Ribisi back for a moment too.
For a brief fleeting moment, Giovanni Ribisi is just there in the background
in the video footage. Yeah,
which honestly
that was funny to see him. Actually, the theater laughed when he showed up.
Which is almost as much screen time as Norm gets, because Norm's just like in the background of a video. He sees Avatar a couple of times, but like he's barely there. Like he's like such a small fragment of this movie at this point. I almost felt sorry for. I was like, oh damn, your part got cut down significantly from the first one.
Yeah. I actually kind of forgot about him until he shows up midway through, and I'm like, and then it made me wonder, like, oh, so what are they doing? Like, what is Norm doing then? Is he working with the humans, or is he like still in the forest area just protecting the Na'vi there? Or
him and the other ones who left stayed behind, I assume, are just still in their own little mini base that are friendly with the Na'vi. But
but that's where the hunting ground is for when the what do they call them? Like the sky people come back. So, but I don't know. Like maybe they'll get into it.
Never get to it. But anyway, so Quaritch, I think it's a really interesting kind of opening to his character where he doesn't know exactly how he died, and he kind of has to like learn that it was Neytiri who killed him, and that's kind of like a sort of driving force. Obviously, he wants to kill Jake. He blames Jake, but then finds out, oh wait, these arrows that are in my body, that like the killing blow wasn't him. The killing blow was her, and that's a bit of a driving force, and obviously this discovering that Jake and Neytiri have kids and that he's immediately willing to use them. We can't really talk about Quaritch as a character without mentioning that, the one new human character that we really have in this film, Spider, who was a baby who was left behind when the humans all went back to Earth because you can't put a baby in cryosleep, which is an interesting little tidbit to know about this world. And he actually has grown up so much with the Na'vi and with Jake's kids that he loves spending time with them, and sort of acts more like a Na'vi in terms of personality. Obviously, he's still a human.
Pandora's his home. That's all he's known. Yeah.
He still obviously breathes like a human and all that and everything else. But he's got like the paint on. He's kind of got a sort of a Tarzan kind of like vibe as he's running around in his little leotard thing.
His loincloth and
his loincloth.
Yeah.
But quite early on in the film, though, they make it quite clear that like he's Quaritch's son. Like this was his kid, and it's like okay, so we're setting up some things here. And one of the things that also sets up early on when Jake's like explaining like the status quo is that we see just a brief glimpse of Neytiri being kind of like, oh, he shouldn't be with our children, he should be with his own kind. Which I'm like, that's kind of rich coming from you, Neytiri. Your husband was a human who transitioned over.
I thought that too. I was like, what? Like, I guess she just really hates humans, and she just doesn't see, so much time has gone by that she doesn't see Jake that way anymore, even though she did do the whole I see you thing, and it was like my favorite part of the last movie when she's holding his frail human body.
I do have some thoughts on that, but I want to stick to Quaritch just now, but I do have maybe an idea of that. Well, okay, I'll just say it now. So what part of the film is it's going through is that all of their kids have like 5 fingers in each hand like a human. And that's weird because the Na'vi only have 3 in a thumb, right? They don't have...
Which I didn't really notice.
No, did I? I never noticed that.
Until this movie.
And then they mentioned it, I went, oh yeah, so they do.
Has that always been that way?
I guess it has. So they're constantly kind of like picked on and told they're freaks for being different. And I think if I'm speculating here or reading the character, I would say that maybe because her children are already different and stand out from the others, she's almost like her... You know, what do I say, racism, but her, like, she's almost like turned that side of her up more to try and compensate and say, no, we are Na'vi, we are part of this tribe, there's nothing strange about us, we are fully 100% Na'vi. It's almost she's trying to like not even prove to her, because I think her tribe is fine with it. I mean, obviously the new tribe they go to all act a bit differently because they don't know them very well, but it feels like she's almost trying to compensate because she thinks that they're inherently different. When I think, you know, part of the message of any movie like this, and I think in the long run of the whole series, will be that, no, differences are what make us strong. And I think it's especially important that in this film that the kids, and we'll get into this properly later, like, there's a lot of, like, potentially mixed relationships then coming from the kids, where, again, it will be, you know, one of our tree people, or one of our tree Na'vi, I should say, with one of these water Na'vi, and then you've got, you know, the daughter's kind of a spider, seemingly. That feels like it's maybe setting up a thing. So I think this idea of like diversifying, mixing of cultures is actually a good thing overall, but it's something that even the Neytiri and a lot of the Na'vi aren't like
struggle with still, yeah,
they're not into it necessarily yet.
Well, I mean, I think that maybe the more obvious thing anyway is that he's Quaritch's kid. And it doesn't seem to be a secret. And obviously, Neytiri does hate Quaritch.
That's true. I think, yeah, that could be part of it. I think I like the idea of her overcompensating, though, just because it feels like it means more to the rest of the film in that case, because it ties into her kids and it ties into like how the rest of her people see her. And that's something that she like deals with. It adds some depth to her character in this film that, you know, like, she is kind of a relatively background character until, you know, the big final act where everything kind of comes together and like she gets more involved. So, but yeah, so, you know, Spider being Quaritch's kid, you know, quite early on they actually managed to, like, you know, kidnap him. They try to kidnap a lot of the kids, but they get away. But Spider gets left behind, unfortunately. And I was really curious what they were going to do with the Spider character. I was like, well, are they going to do this thing where he does convert because he bonds with his dad? Which felt like a really obvious route to go down. I kind of appreciated, though, that ultimately they did this thing where, because Quaritch at one point in the film, despite the fact that he says he doesn't care about Spider or if he dies, he does actually end up relenting in a way that's very out of character for him to save his life. And it's just enough that when Spider's given this choice late in the film where Quaritch is left for dead and he's going to drown, you know, it's the one F-bomb. It's just your one F-bomb in the PG-13 where he's like, you know, F, I can't leave him behind, and he goes and saves him. And I thought, oh, maybe he's going to stay with him now, but I actually think it's far more interesting that he saved him and then immediately went back to, you know, Jake's family. He immediately goes back to Jake's family, and Jake embraces him and repeats the line, you know, a son for a son, but not a death for a death, but you know, we'll take you in now as like, I mean, they kind of already took him in anyway, but like, we're going to officially take you in as a son now, because, yeah, you know.
Although he and Neytiri probably have some things to work out.
Oh, probably. Well, Neytiri did try to kill him. You know, I mean, that's the moment, right?
She threatened to, and yeah. I believed her.
So did I. Yeah, that's the moment where Quaritch like sort of like relents and like gives up their daughters, is because Neytiri's threatening Spider, and I have to imagine the chemistry between Spider and Neytiri in the next movie is going to be a bit awkward, because even if he understands why she did it, like, you were willing to slit my throat. Like, yeah, you know, that's some trauma there.
Well, I mean, since you've already kind of gone to the end of the movie, I'd like to talk about what I find really intriguing about Quaritch's character, because this whole thing has been about revenge for him. Like once he sees that he's blue, and then he knows how he died. He's just had this tunnel vision of vindication. Trying to kill who killed him, and not accepting himself as like a Na'vi, but as just like, I'm just an extension of who I was, and then who I was rageful and vengeful, and which made him a great colonel. But now that revenge plot has seemingly ended, what does he do now? Because he is an avatar for Na'vi. So what does this mean? Like, I'm very curious about what they do with this character going forward, because I find that it might be like, the heart of another film is some sort of redemption for him. Yeah.
I think it goes two ways. I think it goes to one, what you just said, which is he kind of becomes an anti-hero or redemptive or whatever. And maybe part of that is because he's forced to live this. Because I don't think, even though he's an avatar in this, he's still with the humans, and he'll still be with the humans next film, I assume, as well. I don't think he's really had time to actually like this is my life now, to stop and reflect and like, this is what I am now,
he was like kind of the Jake Sully in this, where he had to like quickly learn how to do stuff, but he only did it with one purpose, which was to get just the tools he needed to get revenge.
He's still him. In fact, one of the scenes that I liked with him the most is we see them climbing up to where all the dragony things are, and he's going to like knock out one of the things with a dart, and then Spider kind of mocks him, and he's like, wait, did Jake Sully do this the hard way?
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, I can't have him with a bigger dick. Here, take my gun. I'm going to go do this like the way Jake Sully did it.
He just punches it. It's so funny. Oh my god.
Yeah, he punches it in the face. There's a couple
of great laughs in this, and that was one of them.
Basically, I mean, I wanted, this was, to me, this was the equivalent of him kicking down the door and like firing his gun at the jet in the last movie. Was him going up and saying, no, I'm doing this the hard way because Jake did it, and then punching the dragon in the face.
Yeah, they try to play it off like he fell and he might have died or whatever. Like nobody buys it.
Yeah, no one's buying that.
The audience doesn't buy it. We're just waiting for him to rise back up.
But and that was one of the moments where I thought, oh, maybe Spider's going to start to like his dad a little bit, because he's seeing, oh, he's until
he punches the banshee though.
Well, no, it's after he punches him that where it's like he's impressed that he still did this. Right. He still like tamed the beast, and it was a different way than the Na'vi do it, obviously. But
so brutal, yeah.
This was the tough love approach, as it were. I think I think there's a lot of potential. I think the other way it could go, because I said there's two ways I think it could go. I think the other way it could go, and I think part of this is what I was feeling from the rest of this movie, is that it's really the kids' movie, and a big part of this is going to be transitioning to the kids as the main characters. I could see both Jake and Quaritch dying at like the end of the third movie. I could see them killing each other, and like the kids being the main characters after that. I could really see that happening.
I thought either Neytiri or Jake was going to die in this one. Like I would have put money on one of the parents is not making out of this movie.
I think part of it as well. So obviously this is the complete flip of that other suggestion, because this would not be a redemptive thing. This would be something where their hate for each other gets to a point where they just both die. Like, like Jake and Quaritch will take each other out, and that's like your big moment at the end of the third movie. Because the rumors, and I don't know if it's outright been spoiled, but I think everyone's assumption is that Avatar 4 probably is going to be straight up war with Earth, and that we might even like bring the fighting to Earth, right, or something like that.
I want to say it was Cameron who said something about that.
And honestly, given the way that this ends, where Jake's saying, no, we have to take the fight to now that the Earth's come back bigger and stronger, they've got this city they're building now in Pandora, and he's saying the final call of this movie is him saying, we're getting rid of them, we're going to make this a war. Like, it stands to reason that then the next one after that would be, oh, the war's going to become like, it's like the planets are at war with each other now, just entirely. It's not just on Pandora anymore, and like that could be that's exciting. It's interesting. It feels like it's getting bigger in scope each time, Yeah,
I wonder how much time would have to pass though. I mean, I think we're gonna see the kids grow up. For
so
sure,
do I.
And become adults.
I don't think that too much time will pass between 2 and 3 though. I feel like 2 and 3 might be quite close together.
They've already been shot, and I think they had the same cast. So unless they can age them digitally,
Well, you say that,
alter
but
their voices.
you say that, but Sigourney Weaver's playing a teenager in this.
That is the one thing that would occasionally take me out of the movie. Honestly, it's just because just hearing her voice come out of this like teenager, and even though she does a really great job of like keeping up with them, and like when she doesn't speak, I totally buy that this is just her face.
It's the voice, yeah.
But the voice comes in, and she does sound older than the rest of them. And I, because of how her character came to be, which is still kind of a mystery, but we can kind of like have some theories about it. I think that it's okay that she has that voice, but it still reminds me of like, oh, that's a much older woman playing a teenager.
I actually get what you're saying there, and that there's maybe kind of like a mythology reason why it makes sense that she has kind of like a wiser voice. I get what you're saying there. One of the complaints I saw from early reviews before I saw the film is that I just saw a casual like reference to, oh, there's an immaculate conception that's just kind of brushed past. Now that I've seen the movie, I don't think it's brushed past at all. I actually think it's quite obvious what's happening here. I don't think it's that complicated. Obviously, they're going to like say it more outright, I assume, in the next movie or whatever. But clearly, so Sigourney Weaver's avatar from the first movie, they tried to transfer her, soul or whatever you want to call it, into the avatar. It didn't work because she was dying and it was too late, and that's fine. But she was connected to
Awa
Ewa.
seemed to keep her though, right? Because like she describes going through the tunnel and she says, "I see Awa, I see her. She's real."
Yeah. Right. So she's with like Awa, but I don't think she's in her daughter, quote unquote. I think her daughter is an avatar, literally an avatar for Awa. I think Awa's the father, because they keep saying in the movie, who's the father? I think Awa's the father. Awa knocked her up.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Yeah. That's we want to. They couldn't save her, but they. It's kind of like what Quaritch did, like he just downloaded his consciousness, and Awa like, I'm going to use this to make what I've saved of you, to make a new version of you, but also with me in there too. And yeah, I agreed. I think she is part Awa and part Sigourney Weaver.
Yeah, I think the Awa part especially is important because obviously she seems to have a connection with the life around her in a way that no one else does, and I think that's the big hint. Like, this is Awa in avatar form, and it makes sense to an extent. If Awa is this being of sorts, this mother nature of the planet, if humans can have an avatar to be a Na'vi, then why can't Awa? So it does make sense.
Unfair because Awa already has like connections to everybody, that she also has to have an avatar too.
Yeah, I mean, I in saying that though, I do think that Kiri, there's her name. I think Kiri is her own person though, with her own personality. I don't think she's literally just like in disguise. Like, I think she is her own person growing up. She's still. Yeah,
she's not Zeus or something, like just pretending to be.
Yeah. So this is going to be her understanding who she is and her calling and stuff like that. As her she grows up and the story goes on, I assume. But yeah, so obviously like everyone was expecting big things from her because this was like, okay, Sigourney Weaver's back and she's playing a teenager, what is this? But it does somewhat make sense in the context now if you've seen the movie that she is kind of her daughter. So yeah, okay, we'll roll with it. But I guess that kind of leads us on to the kids in general and talking about them, because we have the oldest son, Anateum, and then the younger son, Loak, and both of these are like, in their like mid to late teens. They're kind of the older two of the group. Although I guess Kiri might be a similar age to one of them, to be honest. He's probably around the same as. Yeah,
I thought they said it was something like 14.
Yeah, something like that.
I don't know.
And then you've got the youngest daughter, which is Took, who's like the wide-eyed, baby of the group.
Yeah, adorable, like the most adorable thing you've ever seen and heard.
There is a moment later on where like there's a couple of times where some of the kids get like tied up to railings, and she's the only one that gets tied up twice, and she's like, I can't believe I'm tied up again. That was honestly, I got a good chuckle out of that.
Yeah, she's super cute. All of her lines are just like, I'm also here, and you're like, oh, they just feel like real kids,
Yeah, I mean, there was a moment earlier on in the film where I thought, and it turned out to be kind of true, but I thought, this seems like a lot of kids. I don't think all of them are surviving.
Yeah, I figured that would happen in a later film. I didn't expect it to happen, excuse me, in this one. Honestly, like, I thought the whole movie that Neytiri was going to go. Like, she was going to go protecting her kids. And then there's a moment in the third act, excuse me, I'm losing my voice, where I thought, okay, no, it's Jake. Jake's going. Jake's doing a thing where he's definitely going to be the one who goes. And that was still, was that after one of the kids goes? I don't know.
Well, I will say on the kids is that, like, when I made that sort of thought at the start of the movie, because at first I was like, okay, how am I going to, because obviously right away you've got these like blue life forms, right? It takes a little bit longer just to sort of like get their faces in your head so that you're recognizing them more. You know, they do, there's some little smart things they do where, you know, Loak's like hair's always kind of tied back versus his brother who's got, you know, the more longer hair.
I honestly, I did have a hard time just like going between the two of them.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't quite sure which one I was looking at.
Yeah, early on it was an issue. It sort of cleared up as the movie went on though, and their personalities became more obvious and stuff.
Yeah.
Right, so it naturally cleared up. But once we got deep into the film and it was like clear who we were focusing on more, the one who dies, which is Nateum, like, I kind of like, if one of these kids is dying, it's him, because because it feels like we don't need the two, like, I think the two sisters have very different roles and they fit different, like, you know, parts of the story. We're definitely focusing on Loak a lot more. He's got the story, he's got the heart, he has this bond with this whale creature that we'll get into, and he's you know, he's the one that we're really developing here. And the older brother, his primarily characteristic is that he steps in to defend his little brother whenever, you know, and even from his father when he's in trouble, and he's like, sorry father, it's my fault, I should have, you know, I'm the bigger brother, I should have taken, and he's like, stop sticking up for this knucklehead, get out of my way, I'm giving him a bit of trouble, he's a shithead, come on. So like, it felt like, if anything, like, if there's a critique you want to give here, is that maybe is a little too telegraphed which one is the important one and which one is definitely dying.
Oh yeah.
You know, so
I knew right away too.
Yeah.
Or I mean, once it became clear because of the characteristics of them, like, I'm like, okay, yeah, he's probably going to be the one who dies.
Yeah.
Although I still had money on a parent instead.
I think it's really saying something about this world in the second movie. Like, how many franchises would you go into the second movie and the two main characters being Jake and Neytiri, would you go in and really believe that one of them could die? And even earlier in this review, I said I'm convinced that Jake is probably dying in the third one, or maybe the fourth. Like, I don't think Jake makes it to the end. And for any other franchise saying, oh, the main character from the first movie will die in the third or fourth, and that's not the end of the story, would sound like a crazy thing. And maybe it's partly because no one loves Jake quite as much as you love an Indiana Jones, or you love you know, take your pick. But I do think it's interesting that I think the kids are better characters. I like them more.
Well, they have a lot more personality than just like, I used to be a jarhead and now I'm a father.
Yeah. It's not that I dislike the parent, because I like Neytiri more than Jake, and that was true in the first movie. I think she's more interesting in this because
I think Zoe Saldana just kills it in this movie.
She's great. Yeah, like
she's so good.
She does so much.
All the emotions that I had are because of her acting. You know.
Yeah, she does so much with relatively little for the first 2/3, and then she gets a good number of big moments in the last chunk. But like Neytiri, I think is a more complex character in this film. Don't get me wrong, I think Jake is more complex this time than last, but it's still the most one note of the main characters, because it's, you know, I need to protect my family, so I'm going to protect my family. It's all about family. It's like he's been watching too many Fast and the Furious movies. He keeps talking about family.
Hilarious.
That was a pop culture reference that's in the zeitgeist right now. Just because you don't care doesn't mean it wasn't a valid reference.
Look, I've listened to quite a few reviews, and like everyone has made that joke. Non-spoiler reviews. That's what I've listened to.
Yeah, you got to take the.
I was really excited getting Avatar. Okay, I watched a lot of reviews, a lot of interviews. I was pumped up.
Fine, I'll take it one step further. You have to take the ocean 1 mile at a time. Is that the quote? Is that the quote from Fast and Furious? You take the roads. You take life 1 mile at a time. I don't know, something like that. Anyway, I was trying to convert it into water. Whatever, doesn't matter.
Nautical mile though, is what you.
Nautical miles. Yeah, sure. So, but no, I think the kids are. You know, I think Neytiri is more developed, and like her reaction to Spider, her willing to sacrifice him, even the idea that when like Jake says, look, Quaritch is hunting us because he wants me and you, So we're actually a danger to the rest of the tribe by staying with them, so we should leave to make them safer. Like, Neytiri's been asked to leave her world, which, again, like, is kind of an interesting plot point for her character, because she's
a fighter too, yeah.
Well, no, not just that, but she's crying about it. She doesn't want to do it, and he has to really convince her that this is what's safer for the tribe and their family. And the entire first movie is about Jake leaving his people and joining her people. And I'm not saying she's been hypocritical, because obviously she's not got the same background with her tribe that he did with the humans, right? It's not the same thing. It's not the same at all. But I do think it's interesting thematically that she in this film is effectively doing something similar to what he did in the first movie. She's leaving her tribe and going with, another type of Na'vi, but they're, this is like, I don't know, like me going to live in Australia or something.
Yeah, it's a big ask for sure. It's it's a lot. And like she knows that other tribes, it's not easy to just join another tribe. And there is a lot of like headbutting involved, and like they're always going to be outcast. And so she's coming from a place where, she and Jake were the leaders of this tribe, and like they were sworn to protect this land. Like this was not just they're not just leaving their home, they're leaving like their stewardship, responsibility. So like this is a huge ask for her, and I think it says a lot that she does ultimately trust Jake and trust his opinion, and this is the best thing in order to protect that land, because they will destroy it if they think we're hiding there.
And honestly, like, I think what's interesting about this is that it retroactively strengthens the first movie thematically, because not only is Neytiri having to do this transition that Jake kind of had to do in the first film, he's kind of putting his whole family through it. And it really becomes this idea that the theme of Avatar, and I mean, it was there in the first one, but I think it's strengthened because there's so many other examples of it in the second one, in both little and big ways, is the idea of someone leaving their culture or their people or their home and adopting a new one, either because they choose to or because they're forced to, in the sake of quarriage, or whatever the reason is. But there's so many of these examples, leaving one tribe going to the other tribe, quarriage becoming an avatar after being killed as a human. Like, there's examples of it up and down the characters now at this point. And then there's hints of other characters maybe being teased or tempted by it as well. And even the idea of Spider, who is someone who has just been grown into like wanting to be in this other world from the get-go. Like, the only happy ending for him I can imagine is that they build him an avatar so he can just switch.
So he doesn't have to wear the mask.
You could almost compare him to a trans character, in the sense that he feels like he belongs with the Na'vi, but like his body just isn't that, at least not yet. Maybe if they build him an avatar at some point, like they can. But
can they though? I don't know. Like, they have some equipment there, but I don't know if they have cloning equipment there.
Oh yeah, I mean, can their specific little group do it? I'd probably not.
Well, I mean, maybe with the whole like he and Sigourney Weaver seem to be having a thing. If maybe Awa can do something for him in the next few films.
Oh yeah, they'd have to grow him like an avatar body though for them to do that.
Maybe there's ways we just haven't thought of yet.
Oh, maybe there's ways we've not thought of yet. I mean, certainly the humans in general can do it. It's just a case of like, do they get into a position where they have the power to like ask for that?
Maybe that's why they got to go to Earth.
It's all for Spider.
It's all for Spider.
It's all for Spider.
I really liked Spider's character in this, though. I thought at first I was like, what's the human doing, like dressed up with stripy stuff, and like from the trailers and posters and stuff, like, am I gonna like this character? I don't know. Like, I immediately was just like, he doesn't belong, which is wrong of me to think that, but I don't know. Like, there was something about it where I thought, is he going to be the annoying character? And I actually really thought he was, again, like one of the, because so much is on the kids, and then he's just another kid who is just in this unfortunate circumstance where he can't, like, he was born on a planet that he calls home, but like is torn between two worlds now because his avatar dad shows up. And how does he feel about that? Like, seeing that his father, he's only ever seen as a blue Na'vi, and does that complicate things for him internally? Like,
that's an interesting point. Yeah, like what he kind of feels that he wants is something that his father now has that he didn't ask for
and hates.
Yeah, there's a lot of like mixed feelings on from him on that, I would imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot to explore there. It's a good thing we got more movies coming up.
Yeah. Well, the third one's guaranteed, and I think 4 and 5 will happen. I'm not worried about it. But so yeah, no, I think there's a lot of interesting like dynamics at play with some of these character breakdowns. I think it's a bit more complex than people maybe give it credit for, and I think that's why I like sitting down and talking about it like as in depth as we do, because I like getting to this nitty gritty stuff where there are elements here where the characters are kind of bouncing off each other in thematic ways that kind of enhance the stories. And this idea that ultimately in any story that sort of deals with these themes, it's like like it's easy now with these first 2 movies for the most part to just look at the humans, go, the humans are the bad guys. But one of the things that I was thinking of actually when I was watching this is like we don't have any clue right now what's going on Earth. We obviously the only things we hear are from this military group and whatever people they bring with them to like colonize and take over part of this planet. And all I could think was like, what if back on Earth, what if there's like not a civil war, but what if there's like an outspoken support for Pandora? Like, would there be enough people who would see what this is as wrong? And like, because I think it's easy to look at the humans as the villains, but I think part of the story is ultimately going to be that no, humans can be good or bad, and there are good humans, and maybe Natiri and some of the Na'vi seeing examples of other good humans. Like I imagine a scenario where maybe they're like awestruck that humans are willing to fight for them or something, and not humans like Jake who wants to become one of them, but are just fighting for them because it's the right thing to do, because they don't agree with the colonization of Pandora. And there's a hint in this movie that like Pandora's like the only planet we can kind of colonize because it's it's close enough atmosphere wise that we can make it work. And we see that they're building a city. They've got these spider bot things that can put a building up in like 6 days, which is pretty good going. That's good time, it's quick building. So no, I was thinking about this as I was watching. I think that ties into these ideas of like later on when we get introduced to the whaler like crew. And you've got Jermaine Clement, who is clearly conflicted by what like this all is, even though he clearly is a scientist. He likes the the exploration and study of it, but he does feel conflicted about how they have to do it and like the purpose of why they do it. Which actually, I've got one critique, one thing that made me roll my eyes that I would like to get out of this juncture since I've brought this stuff up.
Okay.
All right. I like the sentiment of it. I like the sentiment of like humans doing something awful because there's this substance that can make human aging stop, right? But I have to say, having a character hold up a substance and say, this is the reason why we're here, this is paying for all the bills again, and giving it a name made me roll my eyes, because it's just...
Well, the name is kind of similar to ambergris, which is the thing that used to be whales would be hunted for.
Yeah, well...
Go ahead.
This is much better than Unobtainium. Unobtainium was the one that sounded stupid. This one actually has more of a purpose, because everything it does with the whaling stuff and the messaging about that is really strong and has more of a this is more of a like, sure, the Unobtainium stood for like oil or whatever you want to swap it in for in the real world, but this feels a lot more like, okay, we're talking about this practice that we don't want, and the idea of like hunting animals just to like our own greed to want to live forever kind of thing. Like,
or just sell it to people who want to live forever, right? Just people who, I really liked the introduction of Jermaine Clement's character in this, because it reminded me of when I was going to college. I have a degree in environmental science, which is a really depressing major, because you don't just learn about like geology. You got to learn about mining and runoff and acid rain and pollution and all this other stuff, like it's like, God, like everything that we do to the planet is awful. Like we are awful. And but when you have a degree in that kind of field, like, or if you get a geology degree and you learn about all this terrible stuff, who do you work for after? You work for like oil companies. So you already have this conflict, this internal conflict, or like, I got into this field because I love this stuff, but the only thing I can do because of our, society, if I want to make any kind of money, I have to like work for the bad guys. So that was like a big thing in my mind when I was going through college. Like, well, I don't want to work for that kind of company, but like, what kind of jobs do I get? And so, luckily I don't do anything like that now.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't, because I do have, as much as I enjoy using electricity, I do hope that whole fission thing works out. But that is a real conflict that a lot of, scientists have. Like they get these doctorates in all sorts of fields, and then they get hired by people who want to exploit it. Yeah. So I like that his character was there, even if he didn't survive.
Didn't he?
I don't know. The boat like flipped over, so I don't know. The whaler guy definitely died, and I just assumed everyone on the boat.
The whaler guy got his arm cut off with a cable. It was glorious.
It was a good scene. Yeah.
It was like, oh, this is as far as we can push without getting our rating as we can go.
Yeah. You get one F-bomb and you get one dismembered limb.
Yeah. And he had it coming though, because he was just awful about everything he did. Like the way he talked about whaling.
The worst of what we hate. Everybody hates poachers and everyone hates whaling.
Yeah. I think that side of it, which I'll get into more when we talk about the plot outright, because I think we're still just going through the characters and talking about like their kind of arcs and journeys, and So what I would say though, it's interesting that Jake's kind of like putting his family through, not as extreme, but kind of something similar to what he went through. Of like, maybe he's more ready to move to a different tribe and sort of like make a transition, because he did an even bigger one. Like going from human to being Na'vi was such an extreme change that.
He didn't have to do it as a teenager, though.
That's true. Well, hey, anyone who moved houses and had to like change schools when they were a kid will relate to this at least a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
So
I feel like I related to Loak as the middle child.
Yeah.
Who, had to make that transition to a new country during middle school.
Yeah, I did have to change schools once, but it was like after like what you would call the first grade, so I don't really remember. It wasn't that big a deal.
Like my sister adapted to California life very quickly, and like you would never know that she was born in Canada.
Yes, except for just the odd rogue little A that comes out when she's not.
We can't get rid of it.
She's like, maybe it's because I'm thinking of Jermaine Clement, which is making me think of New Zealand, which is making me think of What We Do in the Shadows. But I'm thinking of Matt Berry trying to do an Arizona, or not even trying to do an Arizona accent. But I'm imagining your sister trying to
Tucson, Arizona.
Yes. I'm imagining your sister trying to like convince everyone she's American by like saying something really like American, pass me the Coca-Cola and like cheeseburger, eh? But just like the A just comes out at the end.
Yeah, I think it's House is the big one. House and Sorry. Those are the ones those are the giveaways.
So yeah, no, I mean, Loak's obviously the star of the show in many ways. He's the main character, I would argue. He's the one that the plot revolves around. I mean, not the whole plot, but he's definitely the one as far as the kids go, and his stuff ends up tying in, and because it's kind of this running theme where there's a scene early on where the Na'vi, because we get the introduction again of the humans coming back and we see the ships coming, but then it says a year later, so we jump ahead to when they're established a bit. And we see that Jake's leading these like raids on like their trains to steal weapons. So because we see that the Na'vi have got machine guns and other things like that, and it's like, oh, this is Jake. Yeah, this is Jake being tactical. He knows they need these to fight. Because they're good with bows and arrows, but ultimately they're not going to cut it. Once you get into like a real fight. So he is doing all this, and like the two brothers end up at the scene, and they're not supposed to be there, and they almost get hurt. It's this running thing throughout where Loak especially keeps getting himself into positions of like possible danger. He's kind of tricked by like the I'll say bullies, even though like, it seems like afterwards they kind of like see eye to eye a bit better when they relate, and Loak doesn't rat him out for tricking him, but they leave him out in this dangerous part. He almost gets eaten by. I was going to call this thing a whale, but then the actual whale showed up, and I was like, oh, okay, this is a whale. That other thing was
more of a shark.
That's a big shark. Yeah, it's a big shark. And this whale. So it turns out this whale, like species, are very intelligent, which they point out. Which again is also true of actual whales. They're quite smart, relatively speaking.
Dolphins and yeah.
But They're very smart, and like they're all kind of bonded to the C and the V. They all kind of like bond, and like, they come in as a herd and catch up later on, and it's like, oh, what have you done in your travels? And they sort of, yeah.
Did you giggle when the subtitle came up for the whale the first time?
A little bit.
There's some snickering.
Yeah, actually, on the subtitles, I really liked at the start of the film where Jake's like talking to us in English, and we see subtitles for the V language, and then he says, "Hey, I finally learned the language, and now it may as well be in English," and then it just fades to English. And it's this, and I've seen other movies do this occasionally, where it's only in a different language with subtitles when there's other characters around speaking English, so it has to be different. But when it's just the V characters, we just hear it in English, because that's how a comic book does it. You know, a comic book will just do. There'll be a little asterisk. It'll just say translated from French or whatever it is, and it's like, oh, that's fine, yeah, because it's already in text. Doesn't matter. So this is just doing it via audio. It's like, no, we'll do it in English, and it's like, no, they're not speaking English though. It's like we're just hearing English.
Yeah,
great.
Yeah, is it the Hunt for Red October or the submarine movie where they like zoom in on the mouth speaking Russian and then zoom out and it's English.
Yeah, that's a good example of it. I think what hurts that one though is that like the accents are still like wild. Like they should still have the accents.
Sure, yeah.
Sean Connery's like, yes, I'm a Russian. I'm a Soviet submarine commander. Yes.
Yeah, it's all right. It's a great movie still.
So no, he bonds with him, and it's this idea that this whale's been outcast because they assume he killed something, and we actually get when you know Loak goes in later on and connects these squidglies up with him. The squidglies. We see that this was just the whalers that attacked, and he was trying to like defend, and that's why he lost a fin, because he's missing a fin. And everyone else. So again, you've got this theme of like them all saying, "No, this thing's an outcast." You know, it's hard not to think of things like like a How to Train Your Dragon, where it's like they all don't like dragons.
This whale was very toothless.
Yes, very toothless.
It's a very toothless backstory still.
Yeah. So it's a very similar idea. It's about them jumping to conclusions, and them with their prejudice, you know, and like they have to learn equally that like they can't assume things, and that, you know, there's value in all life, even the ones that you don't recognize right away or whatever. So that becomes one of this main trend of the movie, and honestly, some of the biggest fist pumping moments are when that whale like gets involved.
Whale's my favorite character.
The whale obviously it does the big like. I'll call it the Free Willy dive, except of course instead of going over the boat, he just lands on it because he's you know.
As soon as that happened, I went, "Oh my god, I love Free Willy! And I love that they're doing this." Free Willy was such an important movie to me when I was a kid. I just needed the Michael Jackson song.
Free Willy was a really awkward movie in the UK because Willy means penis. So as a school kid, that title was just like we were all giggling.
Yeah, I know.
We were all giggling.
Same everywhere else too, but it was still it's still a great movie.
Yeah. No, like but honestly, the biggest moment though is like when like Loak's having to save, and that was the other thing, is that the kids are the ones saving their parents at the end. You know, that's what really made it feel like a transition to them being the more important, or at least equal characters, if not more important characters. It was that them having to save the parents. And you know, it's like he's trying to get Jake up to the water, up to the surface, but he's trying to hold his breath, and he's just not quite doing it. And then the whale just comes in with a fin and like guides them up. It's like that was like one of those like that, you know, to compare it to another similar kind of moment, that was, you know, Hulk catching Iron Man at the end of the event. That's what that moment was. I
had a couple of moments where I got emotional because that's just who I am. But the most emotional I got in the movie was Jake telling Loak, "I see you." That line means so much more because, you know, we just watched the first movie again, and I'm like, that is a really nice line to be like, I understand you. I know who you are.
I agree.
You know, it says a lot, but when he says it in this movie, I was just like, oh, I'm done.
Yeah, I agree so much with that, because that like, obviously they say it a few times in the first movie, and it sets up what it means to the Na'vi to say that to each other. But in this movie, he's constantly butting heads with them, and even there's a point in the middle where a couple of things he does with the whale we as the audience side with him because no, this whale is a good character. You're bonding with them, and Jake's been a bit of a dick father by like just dismissing what you're saying to him. He's sort of, because you've made some mistakes in the past, he's just sort of dismissing what you're saying now, and we're siding with Loak.
You're the problem kid, like you're the one that we just have to deal with all the time because you're always making trouble.
So you're siding with Loak. So that moment at the end, after the whale, brings them up, and he looks at him and he realizes, wait a minute, you've formed this bond with this whale. You have helped save me. You've helped save your siblings. Not all of them, obviously. One of them died. But
which he kind of accuses him of for a moment.
Yeah.
Or like at least put some responsibility on him for that.
Yeah. The line being, "You've done enough," is what you're talking about there. But and he says, "I see you." That means so much more at the end of this movie when he says that to his. I mean, don't worry, it works. It's great in the first movie when they say it to each other in the romantic way. But this was like, you know what? I have been wrong. As a father, I have been wrong, and I have not understood what you were doing. And in a weird way, like, again, comparing it back to the first movie and his character's journey, is like, this is him saying, I was the quarry to you because I didn't understand what you were going through, and I dismissed this connection you made with a different life form. And that's on me. He doesn't say all this out loud. That's what he's saying when he says, I see you.
We get it though, right? Because it's so well it's so well set up from the first film, so people and even through this one. Yeah,
people are saying Cameron can't tell a story. Like, just piss off. There's so much here. There's so much here, and some of it is in your face.
They just want to be contrarian, like,
Don't get me wrong. Like, the actual revenge plot is really straightforward. It absolutely is. But that's okay because the character depth is there.
All the characters are just, they're onions. They're all layered. They're all ogres, and
they all make Tara cry.
Oh yeah, it's true.
Especially when they get cut up. I'm sorry, it was an easy joke to make. I'm sorry. Actually, one moment with Loak I want to mention is when all the action is going on and he's grabbed a gun. There's a moment where he actually does have to shoot a human, and there was a moment during this where I thought, if the older brother doesn't die, if Nataim doesn't die, I was thinking, I could see Loak being like the villain in one of the sequels, where maybe he goes down this path where he's willing to use violence. And I don't necessarily think that by the end, because his brother does die, because I was thinking there might be like a good and bad brother for like a movie, and not like a redemptive, like I think he would come back around afterwards, but I could have seen him being a villain for a future movie. Because the brother dies though, and like his father sees him at the end and all that, I was like, okay, no, I think maybe that's dealt with now. But
maybe more, not so much a villain, but like a Koba, like I want blood.
But the moment where he shoots the guy, though, I actually really liked it with just a quick little look after he does it. There's just a little moment of like, he's never killed a human before. And that meant something that he just did that. Whether or not he regrets it later, whether or not it's like the start of a thirst.
It should be a big deal, though, right?
But it's a big deal, yeah. That absolutely, like, he feels something in that moment, and it's like a realization that he just murdered an intelligent being.
Yeah, it doesn't go back to it because they do kind of go straight back into war.
Yeah.
But I could see that be something that comes up, or at least I appreciate that it's there, that there is a reaction of like, that wasn't easy, but he has to kind of justify it for a moment.
It's a seed, and it shows that he has empathy on some level. Like that's like, it may be like they can talk a big game because the humans keep trying to kill us. We hate humans, so yeah, of course I'd kill a human. But the second he actually does it, he's like, shit, I just killed someone. Like like, it does mean something. And it's a big coming of age kind of moment. And obviously here, because they go out to warn the whale because it's this whale, the main whale's getting targeted, which we have to mention, of course, the equivalent. And it's not just the equivalent because it's the same part of the story. It's the equivalent as well. The music makes it the equivalent. Is the whale being killed in the herd? It's probably not a herd if it's whales, but you know what I mean.
Isn't it a herd? Still,
it may still be a herd. I don't know. But whatever. Regardless, they and it's the one that's bonded with the wife, the lead wife. Kate Winslet's character is the lead wife of the water Navy. It's her personal pet whale, not pet. You know what I mean? Because
her sister.
But what's really neat about that is that you see like a scene of them bonding, so it actually has a bit of context. So it's not just a random whale that's dying. It's the one that we know a little bit about. It's the one that we have a little bit of connection to. Because
the whales like migrate, depending on the season, and they always come back to be with the person or the Navi that they've bonded with, and they just like catch up like friends. Like here are my babies. I see you have one too, and he's growing up fine. You know, they actually like communicate and stuff, and it is, yeah, it's like it doesn't feel like a pet. Like it feels like. It feels more than like the dragons that they fly, you know. Also, it feels like yeah, a friend, a relative, or something.
And likewise,
much stronger.
They have like a direct comparison to like the dragons that are flown. There's these ones that are more like water based. They still fly, but they can swim in water as well. So we see like, you know, Jake and the kids have to bond with like, you know, new versions of that. But the whaling scene though. Like the music that plays during that as it's actually dying, as it's finishing, is the same music that plays as the trees falling in the first movie. Yes.
I heard that.
Yes,
I heard the trumpet.
I know you did. Because I sent you a compilation of all the times that James Horner's used that. Obviously, James Horner didn't do this movie because he passed away, sadly. But they use a lot of his music in it.
The music was quite good, though. I thought it was obviously, so much of it was the same as the first film. But it was quite good.
I was a little sad that the music from the teaser trailer didn't pop up in it because I really liked that. But, you know.
I can't quite think of it, but it was a nice trailer. So.
Yeah. But yeah, as the whale's dying, I like the idea that this. I think what I like about it, just to sort of, I'm trying to, you know, put my thoughts into a verbiage that isn't just vomit. So. Obviously, the tree fall was a big deal. This was their home being destroyed in the first movie. It was this big pivotal point in the story. I think by treating this whale being killed in the same way is a really strong way to emphasize how horrific this is, because on paper, it's not as big a deal, right? On paper, this home that's housing to, like, you know, hundreds or thousands of Na'vi, however, probably just hundreds, because I think it's thousands once they connect with other tribes, I think, after that. So, like, but this is hundreds of people who live here. There's, you know, children, and there's like elderly Na'vi, and, you know, everyone, their entire community's in this tree, and they're knocking this down. The death of one whale is obviously, in a pure hard logic way, is not as big as that, right? It's sad, it's tragic, but it's not as bad as that. I think putting that in this moment with that music, with the same sort of end of Act 2, this is what's going to propel the big stuff that's coming after, is the point that the movie's getting across here is how horrific it actually is, and you feel it for this character. And I love that it's saying we're not trying to top the size of what we did in the first movie. We're saying that emotionally this is a bigger deal, and we're hitting you in those chords harder. I
mean, I would think it's a bigger deal already because you've killed something that has, you know, sentience. I mean, maybe because it's Pandora, the tree did, but it's not exactly the same, but like on a scale. But I think it's not just that, but like Jermaine Clement is like talking to Spider about the whales and like saying, oh yeah, they're probably smarter than us. Like, how do you figure that out? Because they have this part of they have more neurons and they're to connect. So they likely have complex language, and they can feel things, and they have relationships, and they're probably smarter than us, and they probably or they definitely like feel more than we do. Like they're more emotional than we are. And it's like the dialogue keeps like building up, just like how bad this is. And then when they do die, or when the whale does die, you see all the other whales surrounding it and mourning the loss of their. So my sister was sitting next to me, and she's like, okay, come on, Cameron, because he kept amping it up, you know. It just kept getting worse and worse and worse.
Just to clarify something here, it's not really about comparing it to the tree itself. It's more about comparing it to all the Na'vi that died when the tree fell, you know, because it's more than one. But what you're describing here is a really interesting point, I think, because it backs up something that I always say, is that you can tell me the world's in jeopardy, that millions of people might die, but if you give me one character that I actually get to know and care about, that means more to me than just a mass of people, which I think is what you're getting at here, is that, yeah, obviously it meant a lot to Neytiri and the Na'vi that we knew in the first film, but it was all red shirt Na'vi that died, you know, to put it in a movie term. Whereas here, this is one character that we did get to know a little of, and we see the reaction of those around it. We see the reaction of Kate Winslet's character when she finds out, and they're all mad. And I thought they were going to get pissed at Jake because he brought this war to their doorstep, kind of thing.
I thought he was going to have to do another Jake Sully speech to, get everybody amped up.
But Jake's willing to leave. Obviously, afterwards, he's like, "No, you bonded with you know, or because they've got like their underwater tree that they bond with, much like they have their, you know, tree. And he's like, no, like you bonded with us, that means you're one of us for life. That, you know, you are our people now, and they're accepted as those people. But you know, it is important that when, you know, some of the kids go to warn the whale, it's, you know, it's a mix of both Jake and Natiri's kids, but also the water tribe leader's daughter as well. Which actually, can we talk about her sexy introduction?
It was pretty funny.
It made me laugh because obviously, like, Jake's family arrive after traveling at this beach, and out of the water, like a Bond movie or something, in slow motion. You know, the hair all wet, sexy. Water Navi comes out. It was a Bond
moment, sure, but it was also like you know, a teenager seeing this girl come out of the water, like, because we're seeing it through the eyes of
Wayne's World.
Sure. Swing.
Dreamweaver.
We're not worthy.
And like Loax just starts staring like, in slow motion. Actually, it reminded me of there's a scene, I think it's in like season 1 or 2 of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where Dennis like sees like a news reporter that he like sort of instantly falls in love with. And this heart song starts playing as she's walking in slow motion, and that's all I could think is she's like getting out of the water in slow motion and Loax like staring. And I'm like,
you can definitely see the same scene happen like with humans in like a coming of age comedy.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, yeah. It's just funnier though because like it's not a human. So, but the camera's still treating her like she's the sexiest thing ever. it's just like that's just confusing.
She's pretty cute. For
like a fish Navi looking, because the water Navi, for lack of, because I can't remember what they're called. Like they are more amphibian looking. Their eyes just have that kind of almost like a Abe Sapien kind of slight, you know, look to them.
We see them like have the secondary blinkers like a Men in Black alien at one point too. Like they have something else that protects over their eyes for when they're swimming. Which
is actually one of the things, you know, as they're training like the family to like adapt to their way of life. It's like, well, because you grew up in the trees, like you're better at climbing, you're better at jumping, you're better at all these things, but you're not as strong, you're skinnier than we are, and you can't swim as fast. And one of the things we learn is that these...
They're like babies.
Yeah, they're like babies. But
they use the baby line.
But they like they can hold their breath for a long time. There's a scene early on in this part of the movie that shows it really well, where they like you know, so let me just get her name here so I can actually call her something. Rhea is a sexy water Navi teenager. That's a really weird sentence. Don't take that out of context. But so Rhea and her brother are teaching at least the two brothers, if not all four of the kids, like how to swim, or at least like they're taking them underwater somewhere, and like our main brothers like have to get up for air like 3 times, and the two amphibian ones are just like, what's wrong with them? What's going on? And like it's like, oh shit, we have to train them how to just hold their breath for like a reasonable amount of time, because it's not that they can breathe underwater, they're just good at holding their breath for like extended
like free
periods.
Divers. Yeah.
And I think it's notable that they take to this better than the adults do, because at the end of the movie, when like Loax try to save Jake, when they're, because you know the big boat's flipped upside down, they're trapped inside it, and the water's rising, and he's trying to like he's having to like sort of talk Jake through how to hold his breath for longer. He knows how to do it now, and Jake doesn't. It's this idea that the next generations get a better chance of like, you know, like properly diversifying and integrating everything better than the current generation has. And I think that's going to be
usually the case, right? Yeah,
absolutely.
And even Natiri has a hard time adjusting to it, because you know, when they all go to war, she goes back to flying, and even Jake is on the water, like trying to hold his breath and use the water dragon thing to attack. And Natiri's like, I'm gonna go up. Yeah. I'm going to the sky.
Which, I mean, I think strategically it makes sense to have a couple of people in the sky, you know. So, but yeah,
it's definitely helpful. I really love Natiri and Kate Winslet's character also, and their little like headbutting scenes. I think probably the biggest laugh that the theater got, for me as well, is after Kiri gets injured, and they call in, you know, what's his face, nose guy, to come in and. I don't remember his name.
Norm and the other dude.
They call in Norm to like, you know, oh yeah, we're scanning her brain and stuff. Everything seems to be fine. She's not waking up for some reason. And then the Kate Winslet shows up when she's got her like shaman stuff that she's going to do, and Natiri's like, "Get out of here! You do nothing. Like, you've done nothing. Just go." But again, it's probably just her acting. Like she was so good in this. So
no, she was very good. I think on Kiri, because you mentioned her getting hurt there. This is like she basically has like a seizure when she connects to the the tree, the underwater tree. That's the life,
the Awa tree or whatever. Yeah.
And like the doctor's like telling Jake, like, you can never let her do that again, because basically part of just because she's different, like. It's basically epilepsy, and this will trigger if she ever connects to it, and it could kill her. Like this reaction was severe, and he's like, whatever, because obviously to the Na'vi this is a big deal. Like they have to connect to their tree, and Kiri already is like expressed throughout the film that she feels different, partly because she's this immaculate conception. She has the extra fingers, like the other kids like call her a freak at one point. This is already something that's playing on her, and this is going to be a further separation. And then obviously after this though, we then get her scenes of where she's starting to kind of like communicate with some of the life, or she sends in obviously towards the end she goes and saves her mother by using the light bug things, the light fish, whatever you want to call them. And it's all these sweet moments, and it's kind of like, obviously I expect this to come back up, but certainly it feels like she's actually very powerful, just in ways that she doesn't know how to like predict yet. It's because she's going to be powerful in different ways to the others, and I think that's it's going to be empowering when we see her kind of realize that potential. So I thought they set up a lot of interesting stuff with her, actually. Obviously they set up as well that anyone who goes back into Awa, they can kind of go and see in that kind of like memory, if you will. So we see her like talk to Sigourney Weaver, who's in Awa, which obviously makes sense from her ending from the last film. And similarly, one of the last scenes of the movie is Jake and Natiri going in to see their dead son. And it's kind of like, it's not like they're alive and talking to them directly. It's kind of like, it's almost like a series of memories that are kind of like overlapping and switching between, and like they're kind of communicating, but it's not. It
was like an AI that's just developed a way to hold on to memories like that.
Kinda.
Like we can piece together based on what we've, taken from your minds.
I guess what I'm saying is it's not like they're just going in for a chat and you're on the phone to someone. It's a bit more ethereal where, they'll be coherent for like a minute, but then it'll switch to like maybe something different, or, but, so, it like, there's a lot of interesting stuff set up with these characters. Obviously, I could see, obviously he's just a cute kid in this one and is in jeopardy a lot. But I could see her getting some cool stuff later when she's older. But certainly the other siblings all have like big stuff going forward that they can clearly go into. Even Spider, counting him as one of the siblings, I think. Yeah. They all have a lot of meat in their stories, potentially.
Yeah, definitely. I'm very curious about the Spider and Quaritch going forward in their relationship. And I think there's so much to mine there.
Oh, yeah. Actually, one of the things that I really liked about the design of the characters, actually, is I noticed that this is actually part of what helped me tell the brothers apart as the movie went on, is I noticed that Loak looked more like Natiri, and the older brother looked like Jake.
He looked very much like Jake. Like, yeah.
And I thought that was interesting, that the one who's rebelling and the one who's like running off was the one who looks more like Natiri. I just thought that was an interesting little detail. Especially since the other one seems to like really care about his father's like thoughts and wishes, and has always been very respectful.
It was very much raised as you're the one with the responsibility because you're the oldest, and I think that does just naturally something that happens when you're the older sibling to someone younger. And the middle child would be like, I can get away with more.
And I don't think this is necessarily like super intentional, but I think it also kind of fits into the theme that the kid that was raised to be the traditional respectful child is the one that ultimately meets his demise, whereas the one who's willing to like do things differently and like connect with things he's not supposed to connect to and willing to take risks and chances is the one who survives. Like, I think that makes sense thematically for where the story ultimately is going to go, or where it feels like it's going to go, so I don't know, I like all that stuff. And we could be jumping around because we're just talking about the characters, because I think the characters are by and far the most interesting stuff in the movie.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the plot is very simple. I mean, again, instead of unobtainium, there's this ambergris stuff that we need to collect, and obviously we see a connection to real life events of people poaching for whales, and we already hate all those people, so it's a very easy thing to be like, well, they're the villains.
And now it's
Let's
like
murder them.
And now it's literally stealing life. Like, you're stealing their brain juice because you want to live longer. Like, that's
Yeah. And there's even a line from I guess from Spider, who's like, well, what do you do with the rest of it? We let it sink. Basically.
Yeah, I mean,
they don't treat it as a life.
Yeah, that ties it into, like, I know you didn't love this necessarily, but like in the last movie, it was like, we respect what we kill. We only kill if we have to, and we use every part because we don't put any of this life to waste. Whereas this is like, no, we'll take that one important part and the rest, And because it's a whale, it's like tons of extra, like they're not using,
It's huge. Like, they're inside the mouth of it, and they're just inside a giant cavern. It's
Yeah. So, obviously it's touchy. You can definitely feel Cameron's environmentalism kind of like, coming out here. With a lot of this story. I've actually heard that it's not doing that well in Japan, and part of the reason why is because Japan does have a big whaling community.
When I lived there was a restaurant outside the base that served whale. I never ate it. I did eat some things that I'm not proud of, but I never ate whale. There was just automatically like, no, maybe it's because of Free Willy, but like I just couldn't. I just definitely was like, no, that's crossing a line.
Yeah, that's actually something. You're gonna like this as a vegan, but there used to be a billboard with like animals, and it was like a cat, a dog, a horse, a cow, a pig, and it was it was obviously like a vegan or vegetarian ad that said, where do you draw the line? And I think mentally there was like, right there's a line. There's a line right between these two.
Yeah, but the point of that billboard is to make you ask, why do you draw the line there? Like, what is the difference?
I know. But the reason why I'm bringing this up though is because like even for you at the time when you did eat meat, there was a line. There was a fundamental line. I was like, no, that's too far. Like, that's
it was just I mean, if I had a spirit animal, it would be a whale. It would be a humpback whale, honestly. Like, that's I love whales. I love the humpback whale. It's my favorite. And since I was a kid, and it probably Star Trek 4 is to blame for it, and Free Willy. And I used to have like music that had whale songs in it, and it was all humpback whales. And I had toys, I had stuffed animals. I love the humpback whale. And so, it's an easy thing for me to be like, absolutely not happy. Like, I won't eat dog, or I won't eat, even then, although I might have eaten dog, but
not intentionally.
I don't know. There was a mystery meat in Korea, and, someone brought it up that that's a place that serves dog, but I don't know for sure if they knew for sure, or just like trying to mess with me.
Yeah. Just don't think about it. Like,
I don't want to think about it.
You've left it behind. You can move on.
The line that, it does make you question it, right? Like, I should have questioned, well, why do I draw the line at whale and not tuna?
Yeah. But, like, certainly in this film, they present this creature as being not only as intelligent as the humans in the Na'vi, but potentially more intelligent. It's just that, they can't express it in quite the same way that we're used to seeing. They can't speak. They're speaking.
Yeah, they can't build spaceships and stuff. Yeah. They don't need to.
The hubris of man is that because we can build things. And don't get me wrong, that is one of the almost guilty pleasures of the movie, is that obviously the humans are mostly villains, and I obviously hate them for that. But I do think all their tech is really cool, and I like seeing it.
Man, I mean, obviously, like, right away you're impressed by the look of everything, but when they have that shot from space where you see like the spaceships coming, like the ships coming from Earth, and you're that was really impressive. All of a sudden I was like, okay, this is kind of like a thing that I've seen, footage from space, but it looks so realistic. And we've seen a lot of that. Like, we've seen a lot of movies with spaceships in space. Why does this one look 10 times better, if not more, than all the things that I've seen already? I was so impressed by that shot.
Time and money. That's the answer, really.
It was just one of those things. It's like putting glasses on for the first time, and you go, wait, people are supposed to see like this? And
time, money, a director who gives a shit, and also a director who has the power to enforce that they give a shit. Like, that's the four elements that make for great CG, pretty much. Obviously all the effects artists, but like,
yeah, and I mean, he's right. Like, what are the best? Kudos. You're going to win every award ever from now on.
Which is ironic, because this film had everyone being quite weta.
I'll give you that one. That's all right. Actually, I'm not exactly sure, but like when I was at the show today, because I went in Hollywood to watch it and in IMAX, and it was when the credits were rolling, I just kind of stuck around, just in case. You never know. So I know there's sequels coming and they're shot, so maybe something would come up. It's not really Cameron style, but a lot of people were like hanging out during the credits, during the movie, and then during the special effects stuff, like people started cheering. And I think there are people in the audience who either know people who worked there or worked on the movie. And
not
it's like,
surprising.
That's kind of cool.
Given that there's probably like 500 FX artists on it, it's not surprising that one or two of them are there. Actually, the credits
felt shorter than like the usual ones we get for like, for Marvel films and stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't know. Oh, by the way, I need there's a correction I need to make for the last movie.
Oh.
Which is kind of funny, actually. Celine Dion did not do a song for Avatar.
Yeah, you're right. I learned that today also.
Yes. Apparently it was someone named Leona Lewis did this. I just heard a woman say and assumed it was Celine Dion.
She was very Celine-like.
And yeah. I legitimately thought that was Celine Dion for 13 years.
Yeah, because we got The Weeknd at this one, and I was like, he didn't do Celine Dion again. And my sister's like, what do you mean? I was like, I thought he wasn't a Celine Dion list. She said, no, it's Leona Lewis. I'm like, oh.
Yeah. I don't know who that is. So I just heard the singing and went, that's Celine Dion, because it's Cameron. And Joe's funny though, no one corrected in the comments. I don't know if other people have just made this mistake or if no one cared enough. But
I like The Weeknd, so it was nice to hear his voice. I can't really remember the song at all though, and usually his songs are pretty catchy. So maybe I'll look into it.
Yeah. Ain't Easy Being Blue? There you go.
Nope. That's not it.
Okay. That's took a
Why
stab
so
in the
blue?
dark.
That was a good line that we got early on.
Oh dear. Yeah.
I know what you're all thinking.
So just to sort of reiterate what some of the plot actually is. So like obviously Colonel Quaritch, as obviously an Avatar with his squad, encounter the kids. They have a bit of a fight. A couple of his men go down. They go hunting. So this is actually one of the interesting things, is that they actually do disappear for a large part of the movie, where when we're in the middle act and we're at the water place, so we do cut back to Quaritch as he's learning how to fly the dragony thing. But after that scene, he does disappear for like a pretty extended part of the movie. Like we just stick with the family and what they're doing. But then he ends up teaming up with, because they get like just, it's because Kiri got sick, they were able to see that one of the ships, like one of the other, the few humans that are on their side ships go out to them for the medical stuff. So it's like, oh shit, they're in this region. They're somewhere over here where all these islands are. We're going to start looking. And he starts like, torturing. He almost kills some Na'vi, demanding to know where Jake is. He doesn't quite do it, but he does burn their village. So again, he's willing to kill, destroy people's homes and, pretty much his MO. And he ends up teaming up with the whalers, and he uses the whales as bait. Basically, because the whaler says, oh, we don't hunt them here because they're close to the people, the Na'vi, and that would, be too much trouble. And Quaritch is like, hey, no, that's good. That's what I want. We're going to do it here because I want to draw them out. So he does that. Some of the kids try to warn the whale, and then basically once they have the kids, like all the Na'vi in the area show up, and we get this big war scene again. But it's war scene on the water, so we get whales diving, we get boats flipping. We obviously have a lot more soldiers in the mech suits. There's also like a skinny mech suit in this one, which is not really for fighting. It's just for like walking around. It's just like being in stilts with some arms.
Yeah, we get Edie Falco's in this movie too. I was surprised to see her.
Yeah, she's like the new Quaritch, although she also disappears like after, like she's there for like the reintroduction of stuff where she's talking to Quaritch, but and she also likes to drink coffee like Quaritch as she's like watching people blow shit up.
The mech suit, so she has to like drink coffee like this so that the mech suit lines up to the mouth. I thought that was an interesting choice. Because otherwise she'd get punched in the face, right?
all I could think would be like, why don't you use your own hand for that? And I'm thinking, well, maybe that means she has to take it away from the control of the arm, and maybe that's too like cumbersome to go back and forward. So maybe that's why she's drinking.
Yeah, because if she just uses her real arm to go like this, then like the mech arm might like be here.
Oh, true. Too risky. So she's walking around with him. This is where we get all the exposition of the city, and they're properly settling here now. They want to make this like Earth 2 basically and colonize it.
Yeah. I was curious, like, how long have the whalers been there? Like, you know, they seem to have an idea of where they can. Yeah. You think it's just a year, or
I think so?
Maybe this thing has been going on the whole time when, like, the other part was unobtainium was being mined over here and the whaling is being done over here, and we just didn't like.
Oh, I see what you're saying. You're saying that it was separate enough that they didn't get driven off Earth with the others. I don't know. I get the impression that they just came down with everyone else a year ago, and this is just, you know, they've been doing this for a year.
They knew about this ambergris stuff.
Oh yeah, yeah, they definitely did. Which begs, yeah. So even if it wasn't going on the whole time, it definitely implies that they were doing some whaling the last time they were here because they knew about it. Yeah, that makes sense. Because none of it could have been back to Earth yet. You know, they've only been here a year. We know it takes. We know it takes 5 years to get back to Earth. So, yeah, interesting. But yeah, that sets up all that stuff. And I'm assuming that somebody, you know, Neytiri and Kate Winslet's characters don't get a bunch to do in this movie. I'm assuming they have more. And like, you know, the third, especially if Jake ends up dying all of a sudden, like, you've got this vacuum in the adult characters where Neytiri's going to be like the main one, because that could be quite heartfelt if Jake dies and Neytiri, who has been, you know, very, you know, xenophobic's not the right word, that's not fair to her, but like, she's very much, you know, we are our kind, we stick to ourselves. It'd be very interesting if Jake's death's the thing that kind of makes her have to like sort of accept that she has to like train or teach her kids something different, you know. And maybe that opens her up. It's like, no, Jake believed in this, so I have to try and, you know, follow through on it and sort of go with it. I could definitely see her, like, you know, maybe saving Spider being a big moment at some point, like if she actually like sides with Spider and tries to, like, you know, not intentionally make up for what she did, but like just like the journey leads them to a point where she's actually defending him or helping him, and or something like that, you know.
Yeah.
So,
do you want to talk about that scene? I don't know if we've really discussed like what she did to turn on Spider.
Well, we mentioned it briefly, but yeah. So there's a big standoff where Quaritch ends up with Kiri. Like, he ends up back with her when she was trying to help save the others, and that's actually one of the things that, just to immediately tangent in a way, but
that's okay.
But one of the things that I did want to mention is there's a couple of moments where the kids do make kind of relatively dumb choices that put themselves in danger. But I do want to point out here that it's never a problem because it's always for a noble reason. Like, you know, Kulak will put himself in danger, or sorry, Loak. That's Kulak. Loak always puts himself in danger when he goes to like defend the whale to pull out the tracker thing. But of course, it doesn't matter. You never feel like, oh, you're an idiot, because he's doing it for good reasons. Like, even if it is technically the unintelligent choice, there's always a heart behind it. The reason
all the children are together and they're all in danger at the same time is because they're all trying to like stick together, because they're all trying to help each other out. And
there's constant choices to go and save their siblings. You know, there's choices where, oh shit, the girls are in trouble, we have to go back and get them. Our parents are in trouble, we have to go back and get them. There's constant
Spider.
There's constant heroic choices that are being made that make you like the characters, is I guess what I'm saying. But anyway, so Quaritch ends up with Kiri, and he's like, look, you know, because he tried to make this deal before the big war started, but then he tries to make it again here. He was like, look, you for her, you turn yourself in, Jake, and I'll let her go. And then Neytiri like jumps out, grabs Spider, and is like, no, son for a son, like, you know, and because at this point obviously their son's dead. And all this is in the rain, the fire in the background like adds, because so much of the movie's blue that when that fire starts happening, it really pops, you know, as a contrast to the rest of the colors.
And it's after like Spider observes Neytiri like just murdering, like it with bloodlust, going after a bunch of humans and stuff, and he hides from her. He is like legit afraid of her in that moment, even though there's no one else around, so he could be like, I'm here, you know, let me help you. He still hides from her in that moment. Like she's an animal to him.
There's definitely a complex like continuation of this to you know, go forward with.
Yeah, I thought that scene was saying a lot. You know, there wasn't any words spoken, but it was saying so much.
I think that's one of the things that I'd say about this movie in general, actually, is that I feel like a lot of these characters, we've said repeatedly here, how there's so much left to do, and that it sets up with all these characters and their relationships with each other, that if you, like, compared to the first film where, well, it was clear where they could go with sequels, I wouldn't say the characters had anything left over. You know, it was such a neat bow tie at the end where, you know, Jake becomes in the V, they're in love, it's over, right? Whereas at the end of this movie, I'm like, no, Neytiri and Spider, a lot of stuff there. Loak's rise to being the new leader and like his relationship with everyone else, a lot to explore there, and his love interest as well, which is only, you know, they don't even kiss in this movie, but there's clearly a romantic, you know.
Yeah.
The confirmation of it is when what was her name again? Rhea. When Rhea,
sexy teenager.
shut up. When Rhea is talking to her whale and she's like, I met a boy, and I'm yeah. Just in case we thought, oh, maybe it's one-sided. No. She's smitten. She's smitten. It's fine.
There's some Twitter-pated things going on.
But yeah, so yeah, Neytiri and Quaritch does make this choice. He says he doesn't care. He says, I don't care, he's not my son. And that's something that's like said to him a few times. Like, you know, the new colonel lady says it to him. Remember, that's not your son. Because there's a few times where he like turns off the torture device and he's like, no, let me try the emotional approach to get the information or something. And she's like, remember, don't get soft. That's not your son. And I was like, they're really reiterating this where I'm like, okay, he's not literally the same man. He is a copy of the man. But what is a person if not all of their memories and experiences? Like, he doesn't have the last part, and even though he's not biologically technically his father, it stands to reason that he would care about him, and it stands to reason that he would have a connection with them. I don't think that's unreasonable.
Oh yeah, but I honestly thought that the movie could go either way with his character, where like I really didn't trust him to save his son in the moment because he is so like for the core and bent on revenge. But I also could see that, you know, there are seeds of something like if they go that direction, which they end up ultimately doing. It is kind of a nice moment.
I think that's
also a confusing moment for Spider.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point you made there, is that it really like wasn't guaranteed that he was going to do that. Like I could have seen the point of this scene being to sell, this is how much of a villain he is that he will just let Spider die, and Neytiri's going to have to like, you know, like pull back at the last second. She's going to go to kill him and be like, no, I can't do it. Even though I believed her in the scene, I did believe her, but like I think that's a really interesting thing to pull off, because typically I would say I can kind of feel where the story's going one way or the other, and it really could have went in either direction with him there at that moment. It was a real divergent point, and I think it's interesting obviously what he chose to do. And I think as well, going back to what I was saying about how, you know, the colonel lady and others saying he's not really your son, don't get attached, and then he himself reiterates that throughout the film, I think that's a really important thing thematically, is it ties back in again to the dehumanization of any other life form to justify what they're doing. She's kind of doing the same thing by saying, that's not your son. Because you're not related technically by blood, you shouldn't care about him. And so much of like empathy that is in this story, and is any story like this, is about, no, you have empathy for others. And the blood bond is not actually the most important thing. Like, the family you build is just as important, and often more important, than the family you have just because you happen to be related to someone. So, and this is closer than most because he's still kind of his dad. Like, it's, you know, it's slightly adjacent to it, but it's right. more or less there. So I think the idea that he is going to learn some form of empathy because his son was willing to save him is a really interesting, you know, start of that anti-hero redemption path that he could go on. That does fit into the themes of the greater story and add some conflict internally for his character as well. So I think that's really good stuff, actually. When you stop and think about it and break down that everything in this story, everything in this world is about empathy and about your kind, what constitutes your kind, and should you mix with other kind. And the good answer is always yes, absolutely. Diversity is what makes everyone stronger. But there's all these biases, there's all these prejudices, and even this is a part of that. Even this little conflict internally is a part of that.
It's a pretty good movie.
I actually think I like it more than I've talked about it like through properly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so much of like just taking it all in a theater for the first time, like I am like super excited to be there, and just trying to it's hard for me to even remember, like, you know, how scenes even progressed, because it's just I'm just like trying to be in the moment of what I'm seeing, and I do get distracted by how pretty like a fish is or something, you know.
They do
How
have some.
amazing the spaceship looks.
They do have some pretty well-looking fish. That's fair to say. I can't imagine the effort that goes into making, like, because there's so many little life forms just around in the water that they had. They're not real life forms. They had to design all these.
Yeah, but
so
they
much
all
effort.
look like they belong there, though, right?
Oh, sure,
It's such a brilliant design.
That's what happens when you spend 13 years making the damn movie. Well, the good news is, though, is unlike last time, the next one is completely shot, and like, so the idea that we can have it in 2 years' time is actually feasible because I think it is just effects. You know, it's just post-production for that, and I think this shot, like, I want to say it's like either a quarter or a third of the fourth movie, which is interesting because that's like a really weird amount to shoot of a movie. It makes me wonder if there's a time jump in the fourth movie, and like they wanted to shoot
the kids.
Yeah, so they wanted to do all the stuff with the kids before the time jump. Before,
I think I heard James Cameron in one of the interviews say something along the lines of like, or maybe it wasn't him, maybe it was one of the actors saying like, oh yeah, and plus we did a little bit of the fourth movie because we, you know, the kids are growing up so quickly.
Yeah. So that makes sense to me. That's, but you know, even if it's not a time jump, even if it's just a case of there's just some scenes with some of the kids that like they need to get done. Just you know, so that makes some sense. So
we're getting more.
Yeah, I mean the third one's a guarantee because it's already shot, and I think 4 and 5 will happen. Like, I mean, as far as what this movie's going to make, because the first one was such a surprise with how much money it made. I think this one will obviously make the billion. It might scrape to 1.5, and obviously some people look at that and say that's a disappointment because that's $1 billion less than the last one. But the thing is that if all of these sequels all make $1.5 billion, and it lets Disney have their new theme park, and it lets Disney sell lots more merchandise and a video game and all that stuff, I don't think $1.5 billion is anything to be upset about.
Yeah, I just wish their park was not in a zoo.
That's fair.
Especially with some of the themes in this movie that James Cameron ignored in order to promote at SeaWorld in Japan. What the hell?
Yeah.
Okay, you saying that it's not doing as well in like the Asian market for that reason makes me think, okay, he was definitely forced to do that, but they should have sent somebody else. He should have been like, I can't do it. Like,
specifically
have
Japan.
you seen Avatar: The Way of Water?
There's actually a few, and this is not making excuses because it was always going to make less than the first movie, but there are a few unavoidable facts that are leading to it being a little bit lower because Avatar 1, I think, like, it made like some silly amount in China. In fact, it was honestly Avatar in many ways was the American movie that said, hey, we can make a lot of money in China, which is why so many blockbusters now try to get released in China. Yeah. And the thing with China right now is that because of how they have handled the pandemic, they're having more outbreaks again, and everyone's locking down. So right away, like the amount that they're making in China is probably like half of what it probably would have been. So maybe that means it'll have longer legs because it'll be there for a while, and you know people will slowly get to it or whatever. But you've got that going on, and then you know just in general, you know we are still in the tail end of a pandemic, and it's still something that has to be considered. So
I mean, I'll probably see it at least one more time.
Yeah, which I still think it's going to do very well. It's just not going to break astronomical records like the last one did, and that's okay. If this had to make over $2 billion to be like I mean, admittedly, I agree that making $2 billion on this probably isn't profitable as a whole because they made like all of the third movie too. They probably have to account for the fact that no, the third one has to come out and make another $1.5 billion to, you know, get us to profit. But you know, Hollywood accounting being what it is. But I can't, if this makes over $1 billion and then the third one makes over $1 billion, I can't imagine Disney saying no, you're not making 4 or 5. Like, it's not happening. Will they get a little bit less money to do it? That's possible, but we'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see. So I think there's a lot of depth here. I think there's, especially more I've talked about it, I think there's a lot of character depth and thematic depth. The story is pretty straightforward. The revenge element of it is just kind of what it is. I do think it's a stronger film than the first. I think this film improves the first film as well, which is the mark of a strong sequel. So I guess we're ready to rate the movie. Actually, there's one critique I saw said that I just want to just quickly debunk is I saw someone say it's got the Lord of the Rings Return of the King thing where there's a lot of false endings, and I did not get that at all. No. I never once thought this is the end and then was surprised there was another scene, and then when the final scene actually plays, it's very obvious the final moment because it ends the same way the first one does. It's a close-up of Jake's eyes and he's like, oh yeah, you know, like we're taking the fight to them kind of moment, and that's, you know, Avatar Way of the Water. Here's some mountains.
Here's some pretty music with The Weeknd.
And for the record, I did see this in 3D. It is the first time I have willfully seen a 3D movie in like a decade. I will say I don't think it's necessary. I think, but I will credit it and say it wasn't distractingly annoying either. It was just kind of there, and I think see it on a big screen, see it in a loud screen, but I think 3D's, you know, whatever.
I mean, I saw an IMAX 3D. The next time I see it, I probably won't, but I will. I don't know, like the 3D I thought was just enhanced the whole experience for me, because you really do feel like it's just so immersed, you know, in everything.
I feel the opposite. I don't think it was too bad here because the movie's shot in 3D and it's bright enough and all the rest of it, but I think the 3D is actually distracting to me because it's like a weird extra thing that's not usually there in movies. So especially see when there's something in the foreground that's at the edge of the frame, like it feels weird to me that there's an edge because it's 3D. So this out of focus thing in the foreground, it feels like it shouldn't just be cut off like that. So it takes me out of the movie because it feels like this, I don't know, like something that's not supposed to be there.
Yeah, the thing that kind of distracted me was the fast zoom in to make it feel like a documentary almost. Like you're far away, like, and the camera's kind of moving around because you're on maybe like a helicopter or something, and then it'll zoom in like
I know what you're talking about. So usually in a documentary, this will be it'll be a fast zoom and then a quick refocus.
Yeah. That happened a couple of times in this where I'm just like, well, that was a camera. I don't know. There's a cameraman there. It felt less immersive.
That's why, by and large, you don't usually see zooms in movies, like in TV. Yeah. Like they don't do it because it feels so, because your eyes can't zoom. It feels very artificial. Your eyes can change focus. You can walk around and move, but your eyes don't zoom. So, like, because people sometimes say zoom, and what they really mean is that the camera, you know, moves in, and you know, it's different. It feels different. You know, a zoom, especially a quick zoom, just feels like whoosh, and you're like, oh shit. So it's a very conscious choice to do that, and I think the intent of it is to make it feel like, by making it feel like a documentary, like, oh, this feels more real. This feels like a real place because you've just done the documentary shot.
I wonder, maybe it only happens when you're like with the humans and not with the Na'vi. I can't quite remember because I know it happens more than once, and both times I was like, whoa, that's a cameraman doing that. And it was a little bit like I feel less immersed all of a sudden.
Well, Joe, what's funny actually is that in the case of this movie, it actually technically might not be a cameraman doing it because it's all digital anyway.
Right. So like, but it's super intentional.
Yeah.
In that sense, you know, we're just like, oh yeah, movie.
I think it's almost like a weird meta technique of being like, okay, this movie's mostly CGI at this point, right? There's only like some actors here or there and stuff. So it's almost like, by doing these like almost faults that you get in regular films, makes it feel more convincing because it feels like it's like, because when Pixar are making a movie or whatever, sometimes they'll use like a technique with the virtual camera that they don't have to do, but they do it because it makes it feel like a movie because it's like a technique. And I think that's kind of this idea here, where it's like Pandora just feels a bit more real because we just did something that, even though it's kind of artificial, it feels like a cameraman did it.
It feels like we went to Pandora to film this.
Yes, exactly. That's what it felt like. So,
okay, I don't know. I mean, I noticed it. It made me chuckle, but it wasn't like, I don't know. It wasn't bad. Like it wasn't the wrong thing to do.
Yeah. Also, just for the record, I saw it just in traditional frame rate. I know some places are doing this like variable frame rate where it gets quicker for some of the action scenes.
Yes, it was definitely that way for me.
Yeah, I've heard people say they didn't like it and it was distracting that it was switching back and forth all the time.
I kind of want to see it in 3D and a non-IMAX screen to compare it, because there were definitely points where it felt like there was a bit of a lag almost, like with the frame. And like what I loved about it though is that in the beginning when it first started to happen, like when we first get the 3D and like Jake's flying around and stuff. And I did start to feel a little bit of the motion thing that people talked about in the Hobbit film, which I never experienced. But I got it a little bit in the beginning, but because it was switched to the other frame rate, that went away like instantly. So the constant going back and forth actually, I think, helps with that motion sense. And when it hits the water, like it's always the good frame rate for that. And it's just
whoa. Good is subjective.
The better frame rate?
No, it's not better. No, the higher frame rate. It's not. That is very subjective if it's good or better.
I know. You can get on your soapbox later. Well, Let me finish. Hey.
Okay.
Let me just tell my story here, all right?
Oh, well, I thought you were done. I'm sorry. I thought you were done. There you go.
As soon as you hit the water.
Okay. I was a joke. I'm sorry.
It's a 9.5.
No, please finish. That was just a joke.
I'm over it. It's fine.
There was, I saw potential for funny, and I couldn't let it go.
9.5. I loved it. I'm not giving it the 10 because I just watched it. I mean, do I think it's a masterpiece? Probably. I'm just gonna hold off for a little bit, and maybe when the next one comes out, I'll know for sure.
I'm going with a 9. I'm going with a higher rating than the first film. I think it's very strong. Yeah, maybe could have been trimmed in a little bit. Yes. Don't see, you're poo-pooing. Like, I can't even say it. You're poo-pooing it.
Yeah, your complaints are all petty.
I'm not. I love the movie. I'm not being petty. Do you know the meaning of the word petty? Do you understand petty? I feel like I'm getting like a Jerry Seinfeld bit the way I'm yelling. 9 out of 10. I think the additional characters, the kids are great. The themes are strong, and they're supported by so many different characters and so many different character dynamics in the film that retroactively actually improves the first film a little bit, because it feels like the themes have been carried forward, and now that was always a seed for everything, and not just the plot reasons, but the actual like sort of sentiment behind them and the reason for the film. So
we did it. What an epic review.
Do we make up now? We fought a couple times during that.
Give me some time off.
I was just going to say I see you. I thought that would be like a nice sweet way to end the review, and you'd be like, oh,
I'll take some of that Patreon cash.
Or you'd be like, oh, Peter, that's so nice. I see you too. Now we can wrap up and do the outro, and it'd be lovely.
I'll see you next week.
All right, this has been the Atomic Cinema Experiment. This has been us reviewing Avatar: Way of the Water. Let us know what you thought of the movie in the comments below. You can like, subscribe, ding the bell, and all that stuff. You can support all the content by being a member on YouTube. We're going to be at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and supporting us on a monthly basis and getting access to a monthly bonus episode where we review some goofy B movie of some kind. There's like 40 of those available now in the back catalogue, and then we have the bonus at the $5 tier, which is a monthly show called the Ace Meltdown, which, what do we do on that, Tara?
Oh, I thought you were going to keep going. Why, it's just like a monthly recap of other things we've been watching, other movies, not sci-fi related films, and we also do a little fun quiz to each other. So it's just a nice little way to get to know us, and that's all for you guys.
That sounds so menacing that we said that there. We do a quiz to each other. We don't give each other a quiz. We do a quiz to each other.
Well, yeah. I mean, the point is to win, but like, I don't know. I don't feel like it's very competitive, our quizzes.
No, it's a little sci-fi quiz to each other. It's a bit of fun. It's a nice way to start the show.
We play games and we talk about movies that we've watched, or TV shows, or sometimes video games, even places we've been to. Who knows? Mostly
movies, but yeah, there's sometimes the odd little extra thing. But there you go. That is the show. I will thank our Patreon producers. Thank you very much to Tyler Hess, Cindy Palacios, David Sharp, Bornow, Christopher Moy, David Brown, Al Tradesman, and Alison M4 Dice. They are some of our higher tiered patrons. So thank you very much for joining us. And if you're wondering where Rise of the Planet of the Apes was, between this episode and the last one, we had to delay the recording, so it's coming soon. It won't be next though, because the next thing we're doing to sort of round off the end of the year is our top 25 sci-fi movies of the 1990s. So expect that next week. So look forward to that.
Whoa.
That is the plan. Thank you very much for joining us. We always appreciate it. Hopefully we have enhanced Avatar 2, The Way of the Water for you in some way. I'd like to think we have.
Yes.
Thank you very much. We'll see you next time. Keep watching movies. Computer, add salsa.